All right, we're recording.
All right. Well, I'm here with Dr. Thomas Bogardus after the famous or infamous, depending on your view, his debate with Bosch. Sorry about that, by the way. Condolences.
No, I think it was fine. I'm happy that we did it. I think it went as well as I could have hoped. So I'm all right with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you won the debate. There's no. I don't think there's a question about the victor there.
All right.
It
Well,
didn't
thanks.
look
I
like you were
appreciate
having
that.
the most fun doing it, but yes, it looked. Yeah, I agree there. But what I wanted to discuss a couple things, actually several things. So number one, the topics I have listed are the sex that people are is not a binary variable. And then let me just read it out because I think I wrote this down. The other thing was that even if definitions are propositional, there's reason to have a definition of woman other than the traditional one, even if it is a secondary definition after the traditional definition. And then, are definitions even propositional in the first place? And then what non-traditional, non-circular definition of woman best captures what people mean when they use the term in a gendered sense while avoiding the strongest quote-unquote reductive?
Yeah.
So I think we'll start at the first one, that the sex people are is not a binary variable. And I think I should disambiguate what I mean by those terms. Because I think as much as these words have been thrown around, it causes a lot of confusion when they're not disambiguated.
Okay.
So by sex, I'm using a gametic entailed sufficiency criteria between large and small gametes. So that is to say, those who produce large gametes is a sufficiency criteria for being female. May not be a necessary criteria, but it's, on my view, it's a sufficiency criteria. Those who produce small gametes is a sufficiency criteria for being male. It may not be a necessary criteria, but it's a sufficiency criteria.
Okay, hold on. Can
Sure.
I just stop you really quick?
Yeah.
So maybe this is going to launch us into what a definition is, but I would have thought a definition is necessary and sufficient conditions. So what's missing from this sufficiency condition to make what else might be necessary to be a female other than producing large gametes?
So I think some sort of physiological proximity to individuals that produce large gametes, and similarly from the male side, some sort of physiological proximity. So you can say organized around, that's one that's thrown around a lot, or organized around a phenotype that produces large gametes, or organized around a phenotype that produces small gametes.
Organized around a phenotype?
Yeah, I don't really like that term, but it's like basically it's a proximity of a phenotype. So the disjunction is either producing large gametes, so either that or having a close enough proximity, having a close proximity in physiology to those that produce large gametes. And we can dial in what that means, but sure.
Yeah, you don't mean like spatially close. What do you mean?
No. I mean like morphologically. So, for example, just to help you what I'm getting at. So I don't think that females who went through menopause are not females, right? That's the idea. What I'm trying to do is capture what I consider to be females, but they do not produce large gametes. So, for example, females who are sterile. And so what I would say is that they're not female in virtue of producing large gametes, but they are female in virtue of something else. And that can be some sort of biologic proximity, some sort of could be morphology. So if they have certain gonads that normally would produce these gametes, but don't. That would suffice if they have some other sort of biologic proximity to having structures that produce those gametes, but otherwise would not have. And what we can dial in what that is, there may be some vagueness there, but it's just a way of capturing. It's just a vague way of capturing other individuals that I think everyone knows what we mean when we say, okay, grandma is a female, even though grandma doesn't produce large gametes.
Yeah. I wish I could agree with you that everyone knows what we mean when we talk about male and female, but that hasn't been my experience. But I think we're basically on the same page here. I guess I was, maybe you can correct me here.
Sure.
It's nice to have a chance to talk to you about this, but I guess I thought to be male is just to produce small gametes when functioning properly. And to be female is to produce large gametes when functioning properly. And I thought that little functioning properly addition would cover cases where there's been injury or old age or disease or but I think that's different than what you're saying here. I don't know if we need to spend much time thinking about the differences, but what's wrong with the way I'm understanding it?
Sure. So I mean, putting aside the question of what proper means, if we mean if it's some normative thing, or if whatever we dial in, I'm sure we could dial something into whatever proper means. But I think you'll agree if I give you an example that this is not quote unquote what the medical community would consider proper, or what you would consider proper. So, for example, if there was a virus, right, that infected me and changed all of my sperm into eggs, I would not be producing large gametes properly. But I would be producing them. And let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that they were otherwise they were just large gametes. They would they could combine with sperm and produce offspring. And this whole time, I'm not producing sperm. It has changed. I'm not producing sperm. And it's changed my physiology such that I'm not even in the proximity of producing it, and I'm producing a whole bunch of eggs right now, and I'm mothering children. And the question is, am I female? And I think it would look crazy to say no. If someone were to ask,
I've got news.
Yeah.
I would have said no. No, I'd say you're a male who's functioning like a female, but you're not functioning properly. This isn't what your body was meant to do.
Right. So I think that's
I'm sorry to hear that's the crazy view.
I think that's the difference then, because to me, whether it's a quote unquote proper function or not, whatever we consider to be proper, to me, that's not part of what being male or female is. Like, even if we didn't consider it male or female, even if we didn't see that you are properly a male, you could still, on my view at least, you could still be a male, even if you are not a male in virtue of some sort of proper function, as long as you are able to sexually, if you are able to sexually reproduce as a sufficiency criteria as a male and produce viable offspring, then, well, whether we include the viable offspring part or not is a different question. But on that notion, you would be a male. And if it's due to a virus, or if it's due to some chemical, whether it's frogs with I think the chemical is called atrazine or whatever, that changes the sex of the frog, even though that's not proper function, well, they still change their sex. And I think the biologic community recognizes that this chemical, though it may be artificial, though it may not be, it may be some accident or fluke, they recognize that the sex of the frogs are changed. And so,
can I just ask a question about the frog case? Do these frogs have some sort of like natural disposition to change their sex in the presence of certain kind of chemicals, and then we artificially expose them to some chemicals and triggered this mechanism, or what's going on with the frogs?
So I don't know all the details of the frogs. I just know that there's some chemical that does this, that changes the sex. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what pathway it's working on. Um, we could look that up, but I think the important thing that biologists are focusing on, like even if atrazine, I think, but if the question is what pathway is it working, we could look that up, but
I don't need to know the
yeah,
details of the
yeah,
pathway, but is
so,
there some natural mechanism
mhm,
in the frog that reacts to
mhm,
environmental stimuli and then
yeah,
changes the sex of the frog? And in this
mhm,
case, we've artificially changed
yeah.
their
Yeah, so if
environment.
that's the case, you can try
But
to capture that by saying it's proper because the proper
yes,
things are in play. Yeah,
yeah,
so you can do that. But even if you know even if there wasn't and it's this chemical somehow created one, so let's just grant that there is this mechanism in place for the frogs to change sex, and this chemical is just you know uh, triggering that mechanism. Um, we can argue whether that's proper or improper, what because if it's due to the chemical, whatever. Let's just say that if you have a definition that considers that proper, um, fine. Then you would maintain a consistent view that okay, you would just capture that by saying okay, well that's not proper, and so that's why that is proper, and that's why they're in that case. But I think that would just be a difference in how we're viewing sex then, because um, I think that if there wasn't that mechanism in place, if there wasn't that natural mechanism, and then it just so happened to be that atrazine just created the mechanism, just shifted the mechanisms in place there, I think the biologic community would look at that and just be like, okay, well, the sex is still changed. I mean, it wasn't meant to be that way naturally. I don't know whatever we mean by meant to be, but lo and behold, the sex has changed. These ones are now producing large gametes. The other ones are now producing small gametes, and they're producing offspring that way. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe the biologic community wouldn't say that, um,
yeah.
and that's just going to be an empirical discussion if what we're trying to do is capture what biologists are talking about, unless there's some other goal.
I wouldn't say it's entirely empirical.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we would be doing some conceptual clarification, and that's where philosophers might be able to help a little bit. But certainly, what biologists say and how they use the word would be relevant. But here's something that comes to mind, and I'm not totally sure this is relevant now. But I thought one reason in favor of thinking of biological sex in terms of natural dispositions is that don't we want to say of like embryos in utero, this is male and this is female? Even though there's certainly no gametes being produced yet, but to say that it's a male fetus or embryo or zygote or whatever is to say that it's got this natural disposition. It's ordered towards the production of sperm, if in the case of a male. So if that's right, and that's enough to be male, then actually producing sperm or eggs isn't necessary to be male or to be female. It looks like all that's necessary, if these little embryos can be male or female, is a kind of disposition to produce sperm in the case of males or to produce eggs. And in that case, if a virus takes over my body
Mm-hmm.
and makes me start producing eggs, this was not a
Mm-hmm.
natural disposition any more than when a virus incorporates itself into my genome and hijacks my cells and starts making more of itself. That doesn't make me like a virus or something like that. That's the only example I could think of. That actually happens. There are some far out science fiction examples we could think of where a virus takes over my body and I don't know changes it into like little lizard parts or something. This wouldn't be a natural disposition on the part of my body, and so I wouldn't have what's required to be female in that case. I wouldn't have the natural disposition to produce eggs. I would actually be producing eggs, but that wouldn't be enough to make me female, I would have thought.
So let me just ask this. So, because I know at this point I'm trying to decide whether we have to hone in on what naturally means to you, because I mean I think yeah, because viruses, we can just posit that there's some naturally evolved virus that does this, or we can posit that someone did it in a lab, or I just can go for without dialing that in. I mean, let me just ask a few questions to get a little more clarity on your view here. Let's say we took an embryo and, at the single cell stage, and we just changed the chromosomes. We just took out, changed the karyotype, so that's 46XY, and we just changed it to 46XX. Now, we can say before the change that there was some natural disposition to produce small gametes, and now after this artificial change, there's this natural disposition, or not natural, rather, there's this artificial disposition, artificially induced disposition, artificially induced natural disposition, however you want to frame it.
Yeah.
To produce the large gametes. And if you want to say, well, it's an artificially induced natural disposition because the pathway is already there, we can just say, well, we introduce completely new chromosomes. We say it's 46ZZ or whatever. And it just turns out, we made it in such a way that this embryo will now have a disposition to develop into morphologically everything we look at as the archetypal female, and it will produce the same. It will produce ova just like an archetypal female, and everything else will be just the same. It's just that the pathways are. When we investigate the pathway, it turns out that just there's a whole bunch of different pathways going on. The chromosomes are different, but the outcomes are the same. Like, it produces eggs. They combine with sperm. They produce. They participate in sex the same way. All those other outcomes are the same, but the underlying mechanisms are different. Would you say that this being is a female, or would you say that it's not any sex, or would you say that it's a male?
Yeah, so the case is we do some CRISPR or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we change embryo from, when it's in the single cell stage, from XY to XX.
Mm-hmm.
Have we changed it from male to female? So that is something I've thought about before, and I've kind of gone back and forth on this question. I don't know exactly what the right thing to say is. This is an unclear case. This is a difficult case that makes for bad law. But I guess today, I think maybe I'm inclined in the direction of saying this is, as you put it, a artificially induced natural disposition. Because I don't know, this embryo now has.
We switch the XY to XX.
I'm sorry, what?
So if we switch the XY to XX, you could say naturally, artificially induced natural disposition.
Yeah. Now this embryo has everything it needs, all the programming required to produce eggs. Yeah. So maybe that's right. That would be a way to change the sex of a human. Yeah.
Let's say
the original case was I get infected by a virus, and now some of my tissue gets co-opted, and I get some ovaries or something. Yeah. Am I now forced to say this is an artificially induced? Well, it's not really artificial because it's a natural virus. But anyway, do I now have a natural disposition to produce these eggs? It's the result of a virus. Yeah, I don't know. Does my answer to the embryo question commit me to saying, in the case of this virally induced tissue, now also I have a natural disposition to produce eggs? I don't know. I would have thought, no, I'm not forced to. I think I can still say, no, in the case of, the virus taking over some of my tissue, this is not a natural disposition on my part. And this is not what humans were meant to do. I've been co-opted by this virus. This is not part of the human design plan. And I don't mean to commit us to anything supernatural here. Just like, how a doctor can look at somebody infected with a virus and say, this is a disease, this is a disorder. This is not how things were meant to be. I think that's what we'd say about a case where a virus co-opts some of your tissue so as to produce even human eggs. Yeah, I think that's what we say even about cancer, when it's like my own tissue that's been co-opted. Like, this is a disorder. This is a disease. This is not the way things were supposed to be.
I think we'll have to come. So I'm going to continue down the route of just continuing this work, but I do think that it sounds sort of realism-esque. when you say like this is what we're meant to do, or this is what we're. I don't know if that's where you're going, or if that's the view.
I'm generally in favor of realisms. I
Yeah.
pretty much
Okay.
I check all the boxes when it comes to realism.
Right. Right.
You can't scare me with that word. Um,
Yeah. No. No. No.
but I don't know
It's
what I'm
just
a
I have
realist
a.
about here. I
Yeah.
thought we were both realists about biological sex. We're just trying to figure out. Oh, I guess you're disagreeing about realism when it comes to proper function. Maybe we disagree about
Yeah.
whether
Exactly.
proper
Exactly.
function is a thing. Well, yeah, I guess that's sort of surprising coming from a medical doctor, but you let me know. Don't you often speak in terms of disease and disorder and health and
Yes.
so on?
Yeah.
How do you understand that if not in terms of proper function?
Well, I mean, I think proper function is indexed to certain goals. I think that I think that there are certain goals that doctors have. There are certain goals that patients have.
Is there a
Um,
certain
and,
goal that the body seems to have, the human body seems to have certain goals?
um, I don't think that my view of it is
Doesn't
not.
the heart have a certain kind of goal, to circulate
Well, it
blood?
has a certain kind of function, but I don't think it. I don't think
Oh,
it's goal teleologic. I don't think it's goal oriented in this. At least not in the same way that people's values are teleologic, or people's desires are trying to. People's goals are not to. Yeah, people's goals are goal oriented. It's the tautology, but it
uh-huh.
doesn't seem to be. Yeah, I don't think that. I think the heart evolved in a um, certain had a certain evolutionary history. I think it has a function, but I don't think that. Um,
It has a certain function, and it can fail to perform that function, right?
yeah, but
Doesn't
it's
that just
judged
mean
by
that
the same
that's
yeah.
supposed to perform this function? That's the proper function. That's what it's
Yeah, if you
supposed to do.
say
I think what you're
if
calling a function is just a proper function, no?
can I be heard right now? Am I coming through?
Yeah, sure, I can hear you guys.
I hear you.
Yeah, because to use fail is definitely just to reintroduce normativity, right? Like when we talk about something's proper function, if proper doesn't mean corresponding to some kind of desire that we have, then it's hard to understand what that would mean. You can have an anti-realist notion of proper functionality, like Avi and I are giving, right? To be properly functional is to operate in accord with some kind of desire held by an agent. But things like hearts don't have, desires, right? So if you talk about proper
Did you say things like
functionality,
did you say things like parts? Parts don't have
oh,
Hearts,
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 Oh, hearts.
hearts
Okay.
don't have
yeah,
desire.
yeah.
Hearts don't have
So I
desires, no.
guess I guess what I'm trying to say is what does it mean to be proper if it doesn't mean to um,
Be in
fulfill
accord with
some
a given
desire,
goal
to
or a
accord with the
desire.
desire?
Yeah, be in accord with a given desire.
Oh. Well, I don't know. Do we agree that like all throughout biology there's a lot of talk of function? Like the function of an enzyme, the function of an organ, the function
Mm-hmm.
of the eyes is to see.
Well, wait, but what I'm trying to get clarity on is just what does proper mean if proper isn't just saying corresponds to some goal we have or some desire we have? What would proper mean?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I was
we're
trying
not
to
disputing
tell
the
you.
notion of function. We're like the notion of function. I understand. I agree. There's talk
Yeah,
of function all the time.
because I think
But what is yeah?
Yeah.
yeah, like I take the view that like realism is like it just sounds like gibberish to me. Like I understand what it means to say that something has a function that's correct with respect to some kind of goal, right? With respect to some agent's desire. But to say it's just correct, like without without that qualification, it's like what do you mean? I don't even have a concept of like are you talking about some notion of like stance independent correctness?
Well, yeah, I was trying to explain what I meant when I asked you, do we agree that like talk of function is ubiquitous in biology? And I thought we had agreed to that. But I think when biologists say things like the function of the eye is to see, the function of this enzyme is to do such and such, they really just mean proper function. Because of course, when somebody's suffering from glaucoma, we don't say, ah, yes, that is but one more function of the eye. No, we
No,
say this is,
but I'm
dysfunction.
not asking if they mean proper function. I'm asking what proper means there.
Oh, well, I was just going to get you committed to the idea that this exists, and then we could try to figure out what it means.
No, I don't
Um,
I can't accept some proposition like X exists if I'm not sure what X refers to. It might not even be a proposition to say it
oh.
exists, right? Imagine if it just
No,
refers
I
to
think
some gibberish.
you can accept some propositions as true, even if you don't understand what they mean. For
No,
sure,
you
you
didn't.
can.
You missed me on that. I said I'm not even granting it's a proposition because it has a term in it whose meaning I don't understand. That term, once I
Oh,
know what it might not even have a meaning, right? Once the gap is filled in there, just like the term
Oh,
woman, right? It could turn out it's just vacuous, or it could turn out it's circular, or it could turn out it's non-propositional, right? And if it's non-propositional, it's not something that's even in the category of that which I
so
can have a belief
you're
about.
claiming not to understand function talk in biology. Is that
No,
right?
I'm claiming that I don't understand what you mean by proper if you're using the term in a stance independent way.
Do you understand function talk in biology?
I don't know why you're avoiding the question. Can you explain what
I'm
you
not.
mean by look? Do you
Yes,
do
I
you
think
mean
that
proper in
function
a
talk in
stance?
biology.
I'm not asking about function talk. I said when you use the term proper, are you using it in a stance independent way? That's my so don't ask me a question. Just that's my question. Are you using it stance independently?
Do you mean that some things can have functions and this is not determined by any human agent or something? Is that what you mean
I
by stance independent?
I'm saying when you use the word proper to be
Uh,
if stance dependently proper is just to say this thing accords with someone's desires, right? Now, are you
okay, then I
when you
think there are
use the
some
term
functions in biology that don't accord with anybody's desires. They need not accord with anybody's desires.
and
Yeah.
are they nonetheless proper?
Well, I guess I mean setting aside God. Let's say that. Set aside God.
One sec. Why did my screen
Um,
just blank out? Sorry. Wait, 1 second. I'm getting some kind of glitch here. Okay, sorry about that. I think it was just my screen timing out. And Avi appears to be gone. Do you see Avi right now?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, 1 sec. I'm just gonna leave and rejoin.
What's
Okay, sorry about that. That was very weird. Sorry, please continue.
so I guess what I was saying was, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking, are there some things in biology that have functions, and this has nothing to do with the desires or goals of humans?
No, I'm saying when you use a term like proper, right? When I say
Yeah.
this is the right thing to do, this is the correct thing to do, this is the proper thing to do, you should do this, you ought to do that. When you use that kind of
Right.
normative language, if that kind of language is
Ooh.
not being used in a stance dependent way, which is to say that something is correct, proper, should, what you ought to, is to say that it is in accord with someone's desire, with some kind of goal, right? If you don't mean proper in that kind of way, I don't understand what it means. So I'm saying, do you mean it like that? And then if not, I need a conceptual analysis before I'm even going to grant you that anything containing a term like that is a proposition. And if I'm not convinced it's a proposition, it's not something I can have a doxastic state about.
Okay, let me see if I. So you're asking me just a general question about my views on like normativity generally.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
if you want to know where I'm going, like the underlying kind of thing I'm getting at here is it sounds like you're invoking realism. You keep talking about realism about proper function, right? When you said that was when I jumped in because it sounded like you were sensitive to what you were doing right there, right? Realism about
uh
proper function. You're talking
yes.
about things like what the human body is meant to do, what the proper function is, right? You're talking about things like
Yeah.
this. And I think if that notion there, proper, if that's not cashed out in an anti-realist way, we're introducing gibberish into the conversation. I'm losing track of what you're even saying, right? So I'm trying to understand when you say
You think the realist position is gibberish? Is
I
that
don't
what you just said?
understand it. I certainly don't understand what
Oh,
realists are saying. Yeah, I take the view that we've
oh wow.
granted realists way too much, right? It's not even clear that their view is actually even expressible as a proposition. I don't even
Okay, maybe
understand
we
what
should get clear.
someone
What is this? What is this realist view you're asking me if I hold with regard to normativity? There are moral facts that are not made true by any goals or desires of human agents. Is
I'm
that the
asking
view?
you if when you use terms like proper, if you're using them in a stance independent way.
I tried to repeat that back to you in my own words because I feel like I understand it when I'm saying it. So I'm just wanted to
Yeah,
check it
so
with you. Is this
to
what you
be
mean?
to be correct, well, I'm not sure I understood what you just said. To be correct in a stance independent way, whatever that's supposed to mean, I don't understand what it's supposed to mean.
Okay,
You're
and what is
it's
correct is some propositions about what's good or bad, right or wrong. This is what we're wondering. Are these things correct in a stance independent way? The things are propositions about what's good and bad, right and wrong, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. Those are the
what
things that we're wondering about, moral propositions.
what kind of things would you say have proper functions?
Oh, well, I would have thought like hearts and enzymes and
Okay, so
engines
when you
and
say,
wheels.
right, so when you say it has a proper function, what does proper
Uh-huh.
mean? What's the conceptual analysis of proper if it doesn't if it's not understood in a stance-dependent way, where proper means something like to do the proper thing in this situation is to do what some given agent desires, right? If it doesn't get cashed out in terms of desires, what does it mean?
So to say that like an enzyme is functioning properly is to say it's functioning the way it was, well, I would say meant to, maybe even designed to, but maybe you'd be happy with evolved to. That's what it evolved to do.
To
Um,
do
I'm sorry?
suggests, I think that's just
Who?
burying the question. Saying it
Sure.
evolved to do something is to say it evolved to have a proper function. But what does proper
Yeah.
so this is so that okay, so I don't want to just sit here hammering you on this the whole point, but we can continue if you want, but I think this is probably a problem with what you're doing here.
Well,
I
I think
think
you
that
understand perfectly well the notion of proper function with respect to artifacts,
I
right? There's no
understand
mystery there. So you know what proper means,
I understand proper
but
in an anti-realist sense. I don't understand proper in a stance independent way, if that's what you're talking about.
what is the anti-realist sense of the word proper?
I have no idea, but if you don't assent to the fact that
I'm
you're
sorry, you
using the
just said
term,
you
sorry,
No,
understood it
he
though.
asked you about
one
the
second.
anti-realist one.
What
I
is the anti? Sorry, I thought you said the realist sense. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, the anti-realist sense is just to say it corresponds to some desire.
corresponds to
So
some
to
desire.
say X is good is to say I desire X.
Ooh.
Or
And
or
that
to
you
or
think
to
that makes sense to you.
yeah. So if
So
you
people
wanted
who
to, if
desire really horrible things, you would say, "Oh, well, that's good."
it's good
If
from
I
their
told you
point to say all it
it's
means
good
to
from their
say
point of view, sure, but it's not actually
what well
good, right?
let's stop for a second. All it means to say that it's good is that they desire it, right?
No,
So
that's certainly
on
not what the word good means.
wait,
No, to him, that's what it
right,
means.
exactly. So when you think you're getting some kind of weird dunk there, whatever it is you think you're doing, when you're going, well, you're saying that it's good because they desire it. I'm
Yeah.
going, well, when I say good, all I mean by good is that they desire it. So yes, I'm uttering the tautology that if they desire it, they desire it. But if you mean something other than that it's desired by good, then I have no idea what you mean, right? So I don't even understand the question.
So, I thought in philosophy what happens is we use ordinary concepts that we share, and then we're able to present counterexamples to other people's theories and proposals, relying on our ordinary understanding of some concept. So I'm relying on an ordinary understanding of the word good. And when you tell me that if somebody desires something, then that thing is good, I'm just reporting back to you that I don't think this is what the word means.
Oh, I
Just
don't
like if you
know.
said
I have no idea what you mean by it in that case.
by good.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. It might be impossible to analyze it. Um, so if you think that understanding a term requires articulating necessary and sufficient conditions, then I
No,
probably
I
can't.
didn't say that.
Probably,
I didn't say that. Anything I
okay,
said is compatible with family resemblance, with semantic primitivity, with conveyance of some term only being
okay.
possible by non-definitional means, right? All of that's fine with me. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, you have to convey it, whether it's by defining it or articulating it or doing an interpretive dance. It doesn't matter. I need to get the
Yeah.
concept in my head.
Well, I would have thought we brought this concept into this conversation. We are all familiar with this concept of moral goodness and moral badness, and now we're wondering, what is this thing? And you proposed a theory about what moral goodness and badness is. To be good is
Well,
to
wait,
be
that's
desired.
there's already a level of ambiguity right there. When you say a proposal about what it is, do you think that
Yeah.
I'm offering a theory of public language?
No, I thought you were offering a theory of goodness. What it is for something to be good. You said X
And
is
when we
good. To be
say
good is to be
yeah,
good is to
yeah,
be
but no,
desired,
no,
is
no,
what you
no,
said.
right, right. But when we say I'm offering a theory of what goodness is
Yeah.
there could be the is that says this is what I mean by the term. Is there could mean in the mind of the public, right? So you might be thinking that I'm giving some kind of semantic thesis about public meaning of goodness, right? And that's certainly not what I'm doing.
Mhm.
I'm saying what I mean
Oh,
when I use it.
you're saying what you mean when you use
Yeah,
it.
you understand if someone were to
And
say,
so
like,
when
remember in
I
your debate with Vosh, he's asking, what
uh
does woman mean? And you're saying, well, I just take the question of what does it mean to mean what do
yeah.
people mean when they say it, right? You're just interpreting that question as synonymous with public meaning, right? And So when you said I'm offering a theory of what good is, right? I'm just thinking of the very language you use when you talk to Vosh, and I'm thinking when Bogardus says that, he's talking about a theory of public meaning, and I just want to clarify that's not what I'm doing.
You're just telling me you have a little idiolect that you're speaking, and in your idiolect, the word good means to be desired.
I'm saying this is what I mean by the term.
What do you think people normally mean by the word good? Do you think that normally the sort of property that we're talking about when we talk about what's morally good and morally bad is the sort of property that shows up when somebody desires to do something horrible? I don't even want to like give examples because I want to make this really dark, but just use your imagination. Somebody desires something totally horrible. Do you think that the sort of property that people are typically talking about when they talk about goodness is present in that case?
I'm agnostic about public language there. I'm not sure what the right semantic thesis is, which is why I don't sign off on a view like subjectivism or error theory, despite calling myself an anti-realist, right? And the reason is because views like subjectivism come with a semantic thesis, right? It's to say that, no, it's fine. It's to say that when people use moral language, they are articulating propositions, right? That's an empirical claim about what people are doing. So I'm not going to make a claim like that. But I can say what I mean when I use the terms, right? So that's the best I can give you. I don't have a theory of public meaning. And when people tell me that what they mean by the terms is not something like X corresponds to my desire, I just have no clue what they're talking about.
Okay. So if I were to ask you about somebody who desires murder or desires to engage in sex trafficking or desires to commit a racist hate crime, and I ask, is this good or bad? You would say, well, the way I use the word good, yes. Those are all good
Well,
things.
is this good or bad doesn't have a yes or no answer. Wait, when you said is this good or bad, presumably you're not asking if it you're not asking the disjunction is this either good or bad. You're asking me is this good or is it bad? In which case it doesn't have a yes no answer. It has a good bad answer, right?
Okay.
And
How
to
about just,
answer,
is this good? How about that? Is this good? What's
okay,
happening in these situations I described?
now, I will answer that, but keep in mind, on my view, there's something you haven't specified when you ask a question like that, right? So when you say, is this good? I'm going good with respect to which point of view, right? To say good is to say, does it correspond to the desires of so-and-so? So if you say, is this good for the Nazi or the rapist or whatever we're talking about? Yeah, it's good for them. Is it good for me? No.
It is good for the Nazi to commit racist hate crimes.
Yeah, I don't get it. Is that supposed to, like, are you trying to do
That's supposed
something
to sound
where,
bad.
yeah,
That's supposed to
but what,
sound wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
but instead of trying to take a cheap shot, why don't you articulate that the way that I mean it and that you know I mean it?
I thought I understood what you meant. You said it is good for the Nazi to commit racist hate crimes.
Okay, and why don't you replace good with my meaning of good in that sentence?
Yeah, it is desired by the Nazi to commit racist hate crimes.
Is that something you agree with?
That's the way I described the case. That's what the Nazi
Great.
desires. And then I asked,
Okay,
do you
right.
think on that basis it's entailed that it's good? And you say, yeah. And I say, no, definitely not.
Where good just means that it's what they desire, in which case if you were to say it's
Yeah,
not,
I
you'd be
guess
contradicting yourself because it's a tautology that they desire what they desire.
I think this is evident. This is evidence that that's not what the word good means.
When you say that's not what it means, are you talking about
Yeah.
a theory of public language? Because that's not what I'm offering.
Yeah, I mean the ordinary concept that I up until this point I thought we shared. No, I'm not. I think we
Yeah,
do
I'm
still
not
share because
granting.
we're disagreeing.
I'm not
Yeah,
granting
we're
that there
disagreeing.
is even an ordinary concept. I think there could be variability about the use of moral language. Right? There may be a unified concept, and it may be mine, or maybe another one. There may be variability between agents, or even within agents between different times. Right? That's all empirical stuff. But you understand why what you just said when you tried to say not well, oh, so Nazis raping people or whatever the fuck, someone killing a baby, that's good on your view, right? As if that's some kind of dunk on me. When I get you to just rephrase that, where you replace the word good with what I actually understand that to mean, suddenly it turns into a proposition that you agree with, right? You agree
Yeah.
with the proposition that it's good if you interpret that word in the way that I interpret it, which is just that it corresponds to their desires. And
Yeah.
if you
And
then,
what we're
if your
disagreeing
comeback to
about,
that, if your comeback to that is to say, and then I asked you if that is good, right? And you said yes and I said no. Well, then you're contradicting yourself, because good, to say it's good is just to say that it's desired on my view. So if you say it's good but it's not desired, that's a logical contradiction.
Okay, just hold on one second. I have something going on. I'll be back in like literally 1 minute.
Sure.
Um,
I can talk to Avi for a minute. You could like, do you want to like mute us maybe so we don't bother you?
yeah, hold on. How do I
Okay.
do that?
All right.
How do I mute myself?
There's a little mute icon, but there's also a deafen icon with like headphones, and that will make us quiet. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over quite so much there.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I was hoping that we could like progress the conversation without hitting any realist roadblocks, but I did have suspicions that that wouldn't happen. So yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's also worth saying something can be correct with respect to like the rules of chess, right? Where the rules of chess aren't a desire.
Even if it's not a desire, yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's to be correct is with respect to some kind of standard, though, is the point, right?
Yeah, its point. It's a relational term, and so proper would just be some relational term.
Yeah, so I think it might be. I should be careful there, because when we talk in the context of morality,
I thought of that as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So there's one actually. Yeah, there's one thing actually, and we should make that clear to Dr. Bogardus as well.
Sure.
So yeah, because like so to be proper or to be correct doesn't have to just only be with respect to a desire. It could just be with respect to some non-desired standard. So for example, the rules of chess there are standards that are agreed upon, fine, but once we stipulate what that standard is, something can be correct or incorrect with respect to that standard. So our understanding could be like it's a relational term with respect to some rule or standard or
and desires are a thing that can be that standard, right? It can be correct with respect to this agent's desires.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask Isaac about one other thing really quick.
Yeah, totally.
Related to the conversation we were just having. Let me run a little dialogue by you, Isaac, and you tell me what you think about this and how you diagnose this.
Before you do, though, I just want to point out that I'm still hung up on the initial thing that I came in with. I still don't understand how you're using the term proper. I'm happy to let you go with your question or whatever, but I think that that's like a very clear sticking point here. I don't know how you're using that term, and I think that if there's a gibberish term, just like if we have like a gibberish term woman, it's gonna turn all the propositions that use it into gibberish. It's like the same kind of thing is happening in my mind. That's from the perspective, just to be clear, from the perspective of someone who it sounds like gibberish to. Could be that it's not gibberish and it all makes sense, but yeah.
No, I think what's happening is you have the concept of proper function and you're willing to apply it in certain cases when there's a desire to be appealed to. And then you understand perfectly well this proper function talk. But then when I say of like the heart or kidneys that it has a proper function, what's happening is I think you're importing a theory about what proper function is and saying, well, the necessary conditions for proper function according to my theory are not met in this case. And then the way you express your conclusion is, I don't understand what the word proper means. Wait, there's confusion
there. I'm not talking about necessary conditions. I'm talking about the meaning of the term. Right? I'm not saying these are the necessary conditions for something to be properly functional. I'm saying this is what proper means. Right? It's not proper means something else, and when you have these conditions, you get proper. This is what proper means.
What if that statements about what a word means are giving necessary and sufficient conditions for the proper application of the term?
Okay,
that's what it is for a word to mean something, right?
Yeah, if
these conditions are met, and if all these conditions are met, then the word applies.
Yeah, okay, so that's fair.
You are giving me necessary conditions.
Wait a second. I'm granting what you're saying partially. So I don't want to take a firm view on like theories of meaning or anything like that. I'm open to eliminating one second. I'm open to eliminating the concept of meaning. See, I forgot.
Well, I think what's happening, as I said, is
well, you just said something I was trying to respond to there.
You used the word. Okay, sorry, Avi, go ahead.
Yeah. He was just saying what it means to be.
Right. I don't want to take a view on theories of meaning, but as long as if necessary and sufficient conditions, if you take that to just be equivalent to the meaning, the only thing that I'm guarding against is that we're saying that proper has some further meaning. you can have necessary and sufficient conditions, and then when you have those, you get proper, whatever that is, but proper has some distinct meaning. That is what I want to avoid. But if we're not doing that, that's fine.
I didn't quite track with the last 20 seconds, but let me just
Well,
run this by you again, and you tell me if I said something wrong. You use the word proper regularly, and I think we're using the same concept. I mean,
I'm
we can
not convinced of
disagree. We're disagreeing about what proper function is, and unless we're just talking past each other, we're using the same concept. We have different understandings of what this concept refers to, what it is to properly function. You have a certain theory about what the word means, what it refers to, what the necessary and sufficient conditions are for there to be proper function. And then you see those conditions met in the case of like a starter motor or wheels on a car or something like that. You're like, ah, yes, here we have proper function. But then when we talk about hearts and kidneys, you have a hard time seeing how the conditions of your theory of what proper function is are met. And then here are two ways you can go. You've now reached a fork in the road. You could say, maybe my theory was wrong, and the conditions I thought were necessary for proper function aren't necessary after all. That's one way you could go. The other way you could go is say, I don't know what the word proper means in this sort of case, and that's the way you went. But I think you should just go the first way and say, if there's proper function here, which there may not be, then the conditions you thought were necessary for proper function aren't necessary after all. But
yeah,
you do
I
know
think
what the
there's
word
just I
means.
think there's just confusion here. There's no disanalogy between those two cases. In both cases, if we mean the term in a stance dependent way, in a goal relative way, right? That makes sense
Now
to me.
you're
If we
introducing a theory. Yep.
Right. And I'm telling
Uh-huh.
you that in both cases, I have the same evaluation, which is that it makes sense on a stance dependent notion of proper function. And in the other,
Yep.
and on another notion, it doesn't, right? That's the same in the heart case or whatever case, the electric circuit. It doesn't matter. There's no disanalogy there. In both cases, if you're using the term in the anti-realist sense, I understand what you mean. And if you say you're not, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Well, let me try this example. Do you use
How
any
about, well,
words?
wait, how about
Do
instead of,
you
because I'm noticing an effort to, the thing is, what's irritating me a bit is that I poked a hole in what you were saying, and now you're trying to flip into asking me questions. It's like, I'm happy to answer questions, but it seems like it's evasive, right? Like, do you want to
what hole
maybe,
did you poke? What did I say that you poked a hole in?
yeah, so my issue is that I have no idea what you mean when you use the term proper, right?
My
I'm asking
response
you
is
to
yes, you
convey.
do.
Okay, so
Yes, you do.
do you mean corresponding to some standard?
Um,
That's a yes or no.
no,
Okay, then I
no.
don't know what you mean.
Well, okay, let me give you this example. There are words that you understand perfectly well that you can't analyze, that you can't articulate necessary and sufficient conditions for,
Sure,
right?
sure.
I think proper might be one of those. You think
Okay.
you've analyzed it in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions, but those are two different things. Understanding what a word means and being able to
Well,
articulate
wait, I when
necessary and sufficient conditions, hold on, are two different things. And you may have gotten the
no,
necessary and
wait,
sufficient
I
conditions
thought you
wrong.
just said that. Well, I'm not sure. See, I don't like talk of necessary and sufficient conditions. Those aren't terms that I brought in here. When I talk about look, this is what I want to reply to, okay? I understand what it means to say this thing is in accord with this standard. If you mean something else by proper, I just want to know what you mean. Now, if you want to say I can't convey what I mean, that's fine. But then, and this is the point of my criticism, we've hit a kind of roadblock where there's a term in the dialectic that you're insisting on introducing that I don't understand the meaning of. So I can't analyze any ostensible propositions that use the term, right?
Yeah,
So
I am
can you just
denying that
be
you don't
wait,
understand
I'm
the meaning
not
of it.
I just want clarity about this. Are you are when are you granting that you can't convey the term to me, or do you want to try to convey the term to me?
I am saying I don't need to try to
No, I'm
articulate necessary and sufficient
you're
conditions
just
for you to
going off
understand the
in
term. It's not
I
necessary
didn't
for me
say
to do
that.
that.
I already made this clear. Do you remember what I said about family resemblance? Do you remember what I said about semantic primitivity?
I remember you mentioned those. Yeah, you
Okay,
said
and
you're
what did
not
I say
taking a
about those
view.
things?
You're not taking a view on what a term means. It could be The meaning of a term might be given by family resemblance. A
No?
term may be primitive and inarticulate. You cannot be articulated in necessary and sufficient conditions.
Yeah,
What did you say?
the point that I had made was that I'm not saying that a term is meaningless if it can't be conveyed by providing a definition or something like this. I'm open to semantic primitivity. I'm open to
Mhm.
family resemblance concepts, which presumably don't have definitions, but we convey by a series of cases or something like that. I'm completely open to that. So I just don't want to be attacked with this straw man of like I'm saying something is meaningless or some shit like that if you can't give me a definition. I'm just asking if there's any means you can use to convey the term to me. And if there's not, that's not to say you're wrong. Maybe everything you're saying makes sense. It's just to say there's a roadblock that we're not going to get over in the conversation.
Okay, so you are open to other ways of defining a term besides articulating necessary and
I didn't
sufficient
say
conditions.
defining. I'm open to other ways of conveying a term. And when we talk about defining, I haven't thought exactly about the relationship between defining and necessary and sufficient conditions. So I'm just being clear. I'm not signing off on any specific view there. But yes, I'm open to other means of conveying the meaning of a term. Sure.
Okay. And so if I pointed to things that biologists are saying, said like, look, they say of the heart that hearts pump blood. They say
Mm-hmm.
of kidneys that kidneys filter waste.
Yep.
They say of the Golgi apparatus that it whatever packages stuff, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
Microtubules do such and such. There's all this function talk in biology. And they use a lot of dysfunction talk and malfunction talk and disorder talk and disease talk. Have you now glommed onto the concept of proper function in biology?
If proper there is used in a stance dependent way. So, for instance, to say that the heart is functioning properly, I don't know anything about the heart, but is to say that it's pumping blood at a certain rate per minute or it's doing some certain behavior or something. I understand what that means. That's saying the heart's behavior is corresponding to this standard. But if you say that proper function is not about correspondence to a standard, no, I have no fucking idea what you or anyone else means by that.
So now it sounds like it sounds like you're saying in order to understand a term, I have to
No,
grasp like a theory of it. Like if it stance
I'm
independent,
not.
stance dependent, then I get it. If it stands independent, I don't get it.
That's
I'm
not
not
what I.
asking you
That's
to
not what I
evaluate
did. No,
any
wait. That's a
theory.
straw man to me. I didn't say I need to grasp a theory to understand it. I didn't say anything like that. I'm open to having terms conveyed in whatever means you want. I'm not sure what kinds of ways there might be to convey a term, and I'm also
Okay.
not saying I don't understand anything unless it corresponds to some specific view. I'm just saying this is a way that I can make sense of a sentence like that. And if you're asking me to make sense of it in another way, I don't know how.
Here, let me ask you. This is what I wanted to ask you when I got back from my little phone call. Do you think that philosophers have come up with a
But
satisfactory analysis of the word knowledge?
But what? Wait. I'm happy to talk about whether we have a satisfactory understanding of the word knowledge from philosophy. But I'm one of those
Yeah.
people who's very sensitive to is the conversation shifting around at all, right? And where this started was I was saying I don't understand what you mean by that term. Is what you're trying to do now to convey that term to me? Like what are we doing right now?
I'm about to tell you what you do with the word knowledge is the same thing you should be doing with the term proper function.
Okay, so that's not what I'm trying
So I'm
to
trying to help
ask.
you understand what to do with this term
I'm
proper
not
function.
asking about what to do. I'm
You're
asking,
claiming
can
not to
you?
understand it, and
Yeah, I'm asking if
I'm
you can.
trying to help you understand it.
Okay, all right, because I don't want to hear about
Yes.
what to do with it or this or that. I want to know is what you're trying to do to me or trying to do. Hopefully, you're not trying to do anything to me. Is what you're trying to do right now to convey the meaning of that term to me? It doesn't have to be by definition, but is that what you're trying to do right now? Because that's a fine direction to go in.
I was going to give you an example of how you came to understand a word, how the
Please just
meaning was
answer
conveyed to
directly.
you.
What don't doesn't it frustrate you if you ask a
Yes.
yes no question and someone just careens off and you don't know if they're answering you or not? Like that's really frustrating, dude. Don't do that. I
Sometimes,
don't do that.
sometimes, Isaac, questions have false presuppositions, and
Okay,
those
what
need to
was
be
the false
corrected.
presupposition in what I just asked? Because I
Can you
agree
repeat the
with that, but you
question?
can't.
Can
Yeah,
you repeat the
exact.
question?
I don't know if I can backtrack, but what I can say though is don't just throw around things like false presuppositions if you're not going to substantiate it, right? I don't think that I asked anything with a false presupposition. And if you
Okay.
think a question I ask is loaded, then instead of careening off, just say I can't answer that with a yes or no because I think it's loaded, and then just explain why it's loaded,
Okay.
right? I might ask something
Well,
loaded by accident. That's completely possible.
Okay, but
So
we agree that you might ask a yes or no question, and the proper response is neither to give a yes or no answer, but to question a presupposition. Now, it seems
yes.
like
Now,
neither one of us can quite remember what
well,
question you just asked,
I
but
can't
it is
remember the exact
possible,
form of it, but I can
yes,
remember roughly where we are in the dialectic, which is that,
right. But it's
yeah.
possible that an appropriate response to your question is neither to say yes nor to say no, but to perhaps, if there was a false presupposition in there, to correct that. And maybe there are other cases where the
Mm-hmm.
appropriate response is neither yes nor no.
Yeah, though it's preferable to make it clear you're doing that, right? Because when
Mm.
you're talking to
Yeah.
someone and they just careen off, you're like, dude, like, maybe you're coming back to the point, but I don't know if you are like reacting to what I just said or if you're just going somewhere, right? Like,
Okay.
if you say it's loaded, then I'm like, okay, he thinks I've
Okay.
slipped something in there by accident. Maybe I have. I'm gonna hear that explanation now.
Yeah. Okay. I think the question was, are you about to convey to me the meaning of the word proper function?
That was the
Um,
question. That's
was that the
right. Yeah.
question? Okay.
Yeah,
I
but the
tried
idea
it.
is because
So,
if you are, that's like
yeah,
the right step in the dialectic, because that's what we're hung
yeah,
up on.
right. And the assumption is that's the only appropriate next step in the dialectic. And I
It's the
deny
only
that.
one I can see.
I know. Here, I'm going to show you an appropriate next step that you don't see.
Wait, just to be clear, this is a step in a dialectic to have a conversation about a term whose meaning I don't understand. You think that
But
there's a strat?
you claim not to understand. Yeah.
Okay, wait, that I claim not to understand.
Yes.
You think that there's some strategy other than getting me to understand the meaning of the term that will get us through that conversation?
I'm going to help you see how you can understand the meaning
That's
of
a
a
yes or no.
term.
Are you
um,
saying that there's some other means than providing me the meaning that that's what you're going to try to do so we can have the conversation without me understanding the meaning of the term? Or are you're going to try to convey the meaning of the term?
Can I? Sorry to interrupt.
okay, go ahead, Avi.
I think if I could maybe do a little in translation, I think what can I call you Thomas or
Yes.
Tom?
You
What
can
do you
call
go
me
by?
Thomas. Yes,
Okay,
Thomas.
Thomas. I think what Thomas is going to try to do is say, I think Thomas thinks that you're doing something with the word knowledge that, despite it having all the things that you're saying about the word proper, you still understand the word knowledge through some means, presumably. And maybe that you can use the means that you understand the word knowledge, or whatever understanding you have the word knowledge, to proper function, even if it doesn't have any of the features that proper function are, is what you're saying, the way that you understand proper function. Now, he could be wrong about
So
that.
that does fall into the category of
Yeah.
trying to show a way to understand the term, right? Trying to convey the meaning
Yeah,
of the term.
he's trying to get you to understand the word proper function by
That
drawing
and
an analogy to the word knowledge.
yeah,
And
no,
he's saying, like, all the things that
yeah,
don't apply to the word knowledge.
yeah, and as I
Like,
said, I'm happy to talk about knowledge or whatever.
am I representing you, by
And
the way, correctly, Thomas?
Yeah, that was good, except I've already tried to convey the meaning through ostension to Isaac, but that didn't seem to work. And then I was responding to the bit where he said, well, yeah, I see all these examples of biologists attributing proper function to natural organs and molecules and so on. But I only understand that on a certain theory. And if it's this other theory, I don't understand that. And so he starts like
I don't grant
importing
the others a
theories.
theory. To be clear, I don't
Okay, he
grant it's a
starts.
theory.
The assumption seems to be like, in order to understand this word, I've got to have a theory about it.
What
That's
do you
the
Well,
mean
assumption.
by
And I was,
no, well, just to be clear, what he's saying is that he does recognize that he understands it on this way of understanding. I don't know if want to call it a theory or not, but on a stance, what he's saying is on a stance-dependent way, whatever the stance is. When biologists are talking about hearts or enzymes, if what they mean by proper function is that it corresponds to whatever stance they're referring to, so then yeah, he understands that.
right? There's
But if
some
you
by
mean it in some, yeah,
yeah, and I wanted to
some,
respond to what you said, Avi. You understand that everything you described when you spoke earlier falls into the case of trying to
yeah,
convey the meaning of the term, right? And the
yeah,
reason I
no,
asked about that is just because I want to make sure we're staying on track. Because very often a dialectic just flips into the other person randomly trying to 20 questions you, and it's like, look, I'm fine. I mean, it might not seem like it because I'm pressing the critique right now, but anyone who knows me or watches my content knows I'm fine sitting there at length having someone 20 questions me and try to find the hole in my view. And I'm even happy to do this after if you want, but it's just that's not what we were doing right there. What I was doing right there is raising an issue with this notion of proper function. I'm not here for a critique on my view, right? But having said that, if what you're actually trying to do is you're trying to convey the meaning of the term to me, and you're trying to do that by getting me to reflect on that I'm all open to. Just want to make sure we're on track, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, do we agree on this? You can grasp and competently use a concept even if you can't articulate. Well, I was going to say necessary and sufficient conditions, but you don't really like that. Even if you can't,
whatever the theory is,
say
articulate a
what it
definition.
means.
Yeah, whatever the theory
Even if
is exactly, you mean articulate the definition, right? I'll grant that. You can understand what something means and not be able to articulate the definition. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to be clear,
I had just said, I thought
Yeah.
we started this with, I was like saying, well, what's wrong with this theory of biological sex in terms of proper function? And then you started saying, I don't understand what proper means there. And you were like asking me to, it sounded like convey the meaning in terms of maybe not necessary and sufficient conditions, but to give you a definition.
No.
Okay. And then my reply was,
no. Everything was right until there. That was wrong.
Okay.
That's not what I did. Just to convey the meaning by whatever means, any means you like.
Okay. To convey the meaning by any means you like. Okay, but do we also agree that you can understand and grasp a concept even if you're unable to convey the meaning in any way?
I think that you might be able to grasp it and not convey it to anybody by any means. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
But
but
I think you might be misunderstanding my criticism, right? You don't think that I'm saying you can't convey this to me, therefore your view is incoherent or something like this, right? Is that what you think I'm saying? Or therefore your view is wrong?
I just thought you were sort of asking for too much. Like, gosh, you were saying I don't understand this word proper when you use it in this context.
But what did you think the thrust of my critique was? Do you think I was trying to say your view is therefore false or is contradictory or something? Because that's not what I was doing. I was just pointing out a barrier to understanding.
Yes, you were saying that here's a barrier to understanding. Here's something I will need before I can understand the word proper.
Unless you have another means. Unless you have another means to convey it. Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying I need you to convey the meaning of that word to me. And what I've been saying in response is I think you already understand it.
That's not my full view. I also grant, if you think there's a way for us to have the conversation about some term, T, where I don't understand the meaning of T, if you think there's a way to do that, I'm open to hearing that too, right? But either that or conveying the term. Yeah.
You understand the meaning of proper function. You understand it perfectly well.
I understand it on a stance-dependent construal, yeah. I don't understand it if you say look, this would be like me saying, dude, you understand what dog means, right? And you're going, yeah, I understand it if it's the concept that classifies like the thing that was barking earlier in this conversation, all this stuff. And then I tell you, sorry, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but it's like if I leverage a term that you have your own concept of, and then I say, because you have your own concept, you must have my concept. And it's like, no, right? Like that doesn't have to be the case, right? I understand all of that language, all that normative talk. Like, here's a good analogy. Okay, this one's good. Say that I say the tree over there is taller. Okay. Now, most people get what taller means. Okay, most people would interpret a sentence like that, and I don't think lay people are fit to are equipped to articulate what's going on here. But I think most people are implicitly understanding that the concept of tallerness has relationality built into it, right? You are taller than something. You're not just taller. Even when I say, hey, look at Billy, he's taller, right? I'm implicitly saying taller than his past self. That tree is taller, as in it's taller than it was, or maybe it's taller than the surrounding trees, okay? So we have this notion, taller, we understand it, okay? Now, say that, okay, so I ask you that and you say, yeah, I know what taller means. Now, say that I insist to you that there's a sense of the word taller that can be used without relationality. Something can just be taller. Full stop. You would react presumably to that by going, wait, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you mean. I understand what taller means in the way I'm typically understanding it, to be taller than something else. But when you start talking about non-relational tallerness, I don't know what you mean. Okay, and that's what's happening to me when you talk about stance independent correctness.
Okay. So that was supposed to be an example of a word that I understand, taller than, and then you present me with a claim like X is simply taller than, and there's no Y that X is taller than.
Yeah,
And then my
on
response
your
is that
yeah.
doesn't make any sense
Mhm.
because taller than is a comparative relation, and there's got to be two relata. And this you're saying this is what's happening to you when I start talking about proper function in biology.
That's like roughly right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you have your notion of that term of taller has
Yeah.
built into it relationality. So when I start invoking non-relational tallerness, you're just going, I don't know what you mean. And when I start going, dude, like, look, I see you used taller just earlier today when you're talking about, like your kid or something. You use it all the time. You obviously know what it means. You're like, yeah, I understand what relational tallerness means, right? I don't understand what your weird notion of non-relational tallerness means. That's what you'd be saying to me, isn't it?
Yeah. So I imagine that's how it feels to you from the inside. In the taller than case, it is obvious that this is a relation. And so we're going to need some relata. And so if somebody claims that the relation has been instantiated, but there's only one thing standing in the relation, obviously that's impossible. And from your
No,
perspective,
they have
you
a
think that's what's
non-relational
happening.
notion. Tom, they have a non-relational note, or sorry, I don't. What do you prefer to be called? I don't want to abbreviate your name if you don't like that.
Thomas is fine.
Thomas. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, like no, Thomas. They're using a non-relational notion of tallerness. It's not contradictory. When you're just begging the question against their notion when you say that taller has two relata. Right? Aren't you
They have
getting
a
tempted to
non.
just say to me, what the fuck do you mean? Like, what do you mean by non-relational tallerness? Aren't you starting to want to say that to me?
Well, now it sounds like I misunderstood the case you originally described. I thought we were using the same concept and somebody was claiming something that is clearly impossible.
Not
But
quite.
now you're
We're
saying
using the
no, it was
same.
a
No, no,
they're
no, no,
expressing
no.
a
There's a
different concept
misunderstanding.
with the same
Yes.
word.
Yeah. Well,
They're expressing a
it's
different concept with the same word.
closer, but not quite. Same concept is not close at all. Different concept, same word is close. Concept and thing that might not even be a clear concept, same word is what I'm dealing with.
Concept and thing that might not even be a concept. Oh,
Yeah, I don't even know what people are talking about. They might just be making sounds for all I know.
uh-huh.
Yeah,
Well,
'cause
I
when they
think
say
they
non-relational, when they say non-relational taller, it could be
But
that they could be right. It's possible that there really is some non-relational tallerness that we're all crazy about, we're all wrong about, and they're the right ones here. I don't believe that, but they could be right. Or it could be that they're wrong about it, or it could be that they're saying something nonsensical and they're
yeah,
just uttering gibberish.
and if
Words.
you want if it was lost there, like I don't know if that whose fault it was, could very well have been mine, but if it was lost there because you're construing it as I'm giving a scenario where we both have the same concept, like do you want me to go through it again so it's kind of clear the way I'm laying it out, or did you kind of get it?
I think I have an understanding of how things look from your perspective. I think I understand
Yeah, when I say you get
how
it, I
you're
don't mean
how
do
you're
you
seeing
get
this.
the correct truth. I mean, do you get what I mean,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
Yes. Um, I just really want to say something about knowledge really quick because that would
Okay.
help convey how things seem from my perspective. So imagine we come into an epistemology classroom and we start um, talking about, what knowledge is and who has it and do we have it in certain kinds of scenarios or not? What are some things we know? I know my name. I know that I'm conscious. I don't know how many grains of sand are on the beach. And so we're using this word knowledge in many ways. We brought it into the classroom with us. And now suppose somebody says, in response to like a stopped clock case or something, we say, oh, well, look, if you happened to form a correct belief about the time by looking at a stopped clock, that's not really knowledge. That was just a lucky true belief. If somebody responded, I don't know what you mean. By knowledge, I just mean true belief. That's just what I mean by knowledge. I have no idea what you're talking about if you say there's no knowledge in this stopped clock case where there's true belief. Um, that's how it feels from my perspective. We brought a concept of proper function into this conversation. I'm just telling you that biologists use it all the time, speaking of health and disease and disorder and malfunction. And then you say, well, I've got an understanding of proper function that's stance dependent. I get it. I get what proper function is on that understanding. This other stuff, I have no idea what it means. And unless you can articulate an analysis of knowledge,
Or convey by
I don't.
some
I'm going to
means.
claim to not. I'm going to claim to not know what you're talking about. That's how things look from my perspective.
Claim implies it's a lie. I don't know why you'd assume I'm lying. I mean,
Claims do not imply that
I
something's a
I
lie.
know that the term claim does not literally imply it's a lie, but when I say you claim to not understand, it just kind of has that feel to it, right? It's a connotation. But yes, you're right. It's not denoted by the term claim that something is a lie. I can claim
Maybe
something
it's
that's true.
implicature. I guess it's implicature.
Sure, that's fine. Implicature. What is connotation not the right word there?
Like
But I get it.
connotations were like associations that we have with words. Like I don't
Yeah,
know,
and like
ruby connotes valuable or something like that. I
okay,
don't know.
well
But there's
either
no actual entailment.
yeah, either
Oh,
way, whether it's I'm fine. Like, I was just like, are those different? But whether it's implication or whether it's connotation or whatever, I just wanted to just make it clear that if there's implication, I'm lying. Like, no, I'm not lying. And it's really like it is
yeah.
a frustrating thing for us anti-realists because like, well, I'm kind of from a different species of anti-realists, right? Like, there's kind of like newer breed of us who are raising this critique that realism just isn't even like it's not even clear it's a coherent position. We're not like granting it, then arguing, granting certain things and arguing against. We're like, we don't even understand what you're saying, right? So with a view like that, it can be very frustrating when people just tell you you're like lying, right? Which I'm not saying you're doing that, but it's very much like a Christian just going like, you know, God exists, like you have access. It's like, dude, like he's never talked to me. I don't know that. Okay, so don't like
Yeah.
assume that. I really do not know what you mean. If proper
Okay.
function, yeah. It,
I just wanted to quickly say it sounds like maybe your audio is going in and out, and
Oh,
I
sorry.
watched a
It might be my
video.
distance. Is it better if I'm close? Does that fix it?
I think that sounds better.
Okay, sorry about that.
I remember listening to a video you guys made. It was like a year ago, and your audio was going in and out, and I was worried that was happening again.
Yeah, it's because
But
I
I think
start. Yeah,
if you're closer, maybe that's better.
yeah, it's totally my fault. It's because I start leaning back in the chair. It's my fault.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna put something on the table. You let me know what you think about this. This is an interesting conversation, and I'm happy to keep going. I am intrigued when you say you're an anti-realist, and it sounds like you kind of just mean that generally. And I do want to know what your views are, and we could talk about those views.
Hmm.
Alternatively, we could talk about like gender and sex stuff
Yeah,
if
like the
if
thing
you
we're
guys wanted
supposed to
to.
have the conversation. Yeah. Well, maybe
Yeah.
I'll pass it back to Avi because, like, I'm sure yeah, like that's fine.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just, but I do want to
but I
point
would
out
like to
how.
continue. Yeah,
Yeah,
we should continue
but
that.
it's important to notice this isn't just a tirade here that I've gone on. Like this, it connects back to the topic, right? Because we're talking about sex being to be the right sex. It was defined in terms of proper function. I thought like
Right,
Yeah.
right.
to
Let
right
me let me
and
just quickly add. I'll
I
throw
yeah.
if it sounds spooky and supernatural, I'll just say, there have been naturalistic accounts of proper function. You don't have to believe in God or intelligent design or anything to be into proper function. You can just say,
I'm offering
to
one.
say,
This is
Yeah,
a
it's granted.
okay,
It's
but I was
granted.
gonna apply it to like natural things like a heart. To say that the heart pumps
Yeah,
blood
yeah,
is to say pumping blood was the advantage that was conferred upon an organism, and that's why it's the function of the heart. That was the
but
advantage
that's
conferred on
a
the organism.
standard dependent.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep,
but that's a
that
standard dependent notion that we understand that. Like
mm-hmm.
that's fine. But the point, so if by proper function we mean that the function that conveyed an evolutionary fecundity advantage or whatever,
Mhm.
like that's fine. That I
Yeah.
understand because that is a stance dependent notion because it's with relation to some reference,
I
and
want
the
to
reference is yeah.
I
Okay.
want to say a
Yeah. So
last
if
thing,
you're
and then I'll kind of give it back to you guys fully here, because but this is just I want to explain the reason that I brought all of this up though, so because we had this whole pathway about proper function, so it feels like I just want to put a tie on it before we move on. So the reason I brought it up is because I'm not sure you guys are saying different things. When Avi says that having a given sex is to have genetic proximity to a being that has or that
It
produces
doesn't have to
large
be genetic.
gametes.
Some proximity.
Or yeah,
It's
proximity
physiological.
either construed genetically, physiologically, whatever. Where proximity just means overlap in the quantity of propositions true, right? We can set some threshold or whatever. But
Sure.
when he defines sex like that, and then you say sex, biological sex is about the proper function, I feel like they're actually saying the same thing, and there's just a layer of spooky realism getting in the way. I think if we get into proper function and we show proper function that's kind of bringing in metaphysical spookiness that we don't need, and we kind of get rid of that, it's like, what are you actually getting at? Now, I could be wrong, but
I do think you're wrong, by the way, because I do think we're generating different answers to different hypothetical situations about different beings being different sizes.
Yeah, but
so I think we are different.
Yeah, some of that could be from working from those notions. But anyway, I was just at least my mind went there of like, I'm not sure if they're different, because you both want to say things that are close to this kind of archetype is like woman, and whether you call that whether you define that archetype genetically and then say close to it is about physiological or morphological proximity or whatever, or whether you define that archetype as the like properly functional woman or what, it's like, I'm just curious if there will turn out being a difference if we clear out any metaphysical clutter in there. So that's where I was coming from with that whole kind of line.
As
Yeah.
Avi said, it looks like there might be different verdicts in different cases that we would disagree about. But I think that Avi and I agree that there are two sexes. And I thought what Avi was going to try to convince me of is nevertheless, the sex of an organism is not a binary variable.
Yes.
Okay. And I remember
Yeah,
when you said you wanted to talk about this, and you said this should probably be short.
yeah, I guess I was real. I'm
That's
eating
okay.
my words now. Okay, so there was there's two pathways to understand it. I can do it. I can give you examples and see what your answers are, or I can try to dive into the realism of proper function. Just to whether we call it realism, or just real quick, I understand when that biologists and doctors talk about proper function of different organs, that they talk about just improper function. But the thing I would just say about that is that I think when they do that, I think at least in my experience in the medical community, when they are, if not explicitly, implicitly having some reference there that they can judge whether it is proper or improper with respect to. And there's disagreements about what the reference is, even when we talk about cancer. Like I was at a conference and there's a disagreement over a certain type of cancer that doesn't make a very big, huge difference to a patient. It is pathologically a cancer. It has uncontrolled, unregulated cell division. And if that is your standard for what is improper function to make something a cancer, sure. But if it doesn't make that much of a difference to the patient, then some others would say, okay, well, no, that's not actually what we should call cancer. Now, so there's different standards, but I understand what each side is talking about there. The reason I think I understand it is because it's with respect to something. But if they just said it's proper and hey, like, then I'm well, it might be proper with respect to this standard, that standard, but they say no, you don't understand. It's not proper with respect to any standard. It just is proper. Then at that point, I'm left in the fork in the road. I can either try to dig into what that means, or I can just generate hypotheticals and see what the answers are and try to figure out if there's a disagreement and if there's a difference in the answers, and maybe try to get in. So, I mean, there's two ways that can happen, and I was taking the second approach, and Isaac was taking the first approach. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, but it sounded like both of you were willing to sign off on a kind of naturalistic proposal about what proper function means, and it's something like to say that the proper function of the heart is to pump blood, is to say that pumping blood was the how do you put it exactly? That was the
compatible with naturalism anyway. I don't know if I'm
benefit conferred upon the organism that was the benefit that this organ conferred upon the organism in ancestral environments. That's and pumping blood was the benefit conferred on this organism in ancestral environments. That's what we mean when we say the heart is meant to pump blood. I guess I'm there. We still have this word benefit in there, and there's this conception of like what is good for the organism, what helps the organism, what benefits the organism.
Yeah, I think
I'm kind of surprised that Isaac's just going to let that slide.
Well,
although I don't want to bring it to his attention because I'm so happy we finally agree.
No.
Oh no.
Can I
almost
do
got
it for
there.
you just real quick? Because I know what the response like. The response is that I think we understand when they say benefit. I know I already have an idea because of the familiarity with evolutionary biology and what evolutionary biology and the things they say, what they generally mean when they use the word benefit.
Yeah.
They mean it in the evolutionary sense, and they just mean it in a fecundity type of way. They mean that they will produce offspring that will produce more offspring and outcompete the rest. That's what they are talking about by benefit. And so if, whether that's the best way of understanding it or not is not a position I'm taking on. It's just, but I am telling you I understand it. If someone were to say, what proper function means is just what was evolutionarily beneficial, and what evolutionary beneficial is just what resulted in the most fecundity. I understand what that means. Now, whether that's how I understand, that matches my understanding of proper function or not, maybe there may be some counterexamples to that, but I get it. When someone says that theory, I understand what they're meaning. We're all good in terms of the understanding.
I just want to chime in for 2 seconds
What
because
I
I was
don't
called out
understand is
by
when someone
name
says
there.
it's just proper, and it's proper in a stance independent way without any reference to.
Yo, am I coming through here? Can I be heard?
Now you're coming through.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to say something just because I was called out by name there. I wasn't gonna come back in, but yeah. So just to be clear, that's a good criticism, and I always do this to people, right? If I'm asking them for a definition of the term, and then the very term that I'm confused with shows up in the definition, or a further term that raises the same problem, and of course, benefit sounds normative, right? So if I'm saying I don't understand this thing because it's weird normative language, and then I use that very language, it's like, well, no, wait, there's some kind of weird double standard there. Maybe you haven't noticed, you've got this problem too. But just to be clear, either it slipped past me that benefit was said or whatever, but at the end of the day, I would cash benefit out to just mean something like, oh, it maximizes how many like offspring there are or something like that. If you tell me that you're using the word benefit there in a stance independent sense, then yes, that would be equally confusing.
I am happy to move on. Do you guys want to move on, or do you want to keep talking about this?
Sure.
What?
Oh, no, I'm just fucking around. I just said you started. I'm just teasing because you said by my name. You're like, well, Isaac might think blah blah blah.
All right.
I just wanted to give you a chance to come in and say exactly what you said, and so
I'm just
consistency has been restored.
Yes. Okay.
Harmony has been restored in the universe.
Okay. So what I'm trying to answer is the sex people are a binary variable on your view, and what I take binary variable to mean is a variable that can only have one of only two outcomes. So, for example, truth in a Boolean sense, the truth of a proposition in a Boolean sense is a binary variable. So a proposition can be true, a proposition can be false if we're using classical logic, but it can't be true and false. Setting dialetheism aside, a proposition is not going to be true and false. So it's a binary variable. It can only be one. So the bit system is there's only two bits. There's only two sexes. There's only two bits. True and false, male and female. But what can't happen is that you could ever have a proposition that is both true and false at the same time. Similarly, if sex is a binary variable, what can never happen is that you will have a person who properly, on your view, however we cash that out, produces both small and large gametes. And so my question is that, and I don't think you, and I thought this would take a short time because I don't think you believe that. I don't think you believe that you could never have a human that properly produces large and small gametes. I'm sure you could conceive of some human that may have some naturally producing large and small gametes.
Yes. And there are other organisms that do it on the regular.
Yeah.
Theoretically possible, hypothetically possible for a human to do it. We did briefly on Twitter discuss one case from 1973, allegedly, of a human doing this. I'm not sure whether that's an actual case of a true simultaneous hermaphrodite in a human, but maybe it's just enough for us to agree that it's at least theoretically possible for
When
a
you
human
say
to be both male and female.
sure. When you say that you're not sure if it's a case of true simultaneous hermaphroditism, is that because you require this proper function predicate in order
Yeah.
for something to? Okay, so if that's what it's coming down to, then
Yeah, I think like you had mentioned it was probably a
Mhm.
case of Mosaicism.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah.
That's how you say it?
Mhm.
So I would think like the one before I had spoken with you about this, I had thought about this and I thought maybe here's a way you could get a true simultaneous hermaphrodite in humans. I mean, it would be extremely improbable, but it could happen like a 50-50 split of
Yeah.
mosaicism, like a true
Mhm.
50-50 mosaic. And then I think, yeah, maybe the right thing to say is we've got an organism with both natural dispositions. But it looks like the case that in this 1973 case, it's like a much smaller percentage of the body was mosaic. And then it's less clear to me that
Mhm.
that bit of the body that's producing ova, if that's what was happening, um, whether it's true to say of the organism that the organism had this natural disposition to produce ova. Instead, it kind of looks like the case you described of like a virus taking over a bit of your body and producing ova.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm willing
I
to
think
admit
what
that
happened.
it's
Yeah.
unclear in that case,
Yeah.
but it's theoretically possible to get a simultaneous hermaphrodite in
Sure.
humans. Yes.
And I think what happened is that there wasn't an even just it's not like they were split down the middle with this karyotype and that karyotype. I think um, there were certain organs that this individual had that fully had a karyotype, likely had a female
Yes.
karyotype, and then there were the other organs, and probably the majority of the body that had a male karyotype. I'm not sure exactly what the split was, although I don't think you would say it has to exactly be 50-50. I mean, if it was 40-60 or something like that, or if it was
Yeah.
30-70,
Yeah.
but they were really, if there was, even if it's 30-70, and then, you still have a uterus with 100% female karyotype, and ovaries with 100% female karyotype, and testes with 100% male karyotype. Um, and I don't. Would you say that? Well, no. The proper function is the 70% one, and that's the
Yeah. So I would just say of all these cases, like
sure.
it's unclear, and this is going to
Okay.
be like, one of those things that lawyers say, hard cases make bad law. This isn't the sort of case, these aren't the cases we should look at when we're trying to figure out what biological sex is. These are difficult cases. And something that pulls me in the direction of saying, like, in this case you cited,
Mhm.
of this, I don't know what the split was, 70-30 or whatever. Um, this just isn't part of like the human design plan. I hope maybe you're gonna object to that very idea, but it's not what humans evolved to do to form mosaics in this way. It's kind of like a spandrel or a quirk of human development that it sometimes happens, but I don't think that it conferred any sort of advantage in ancestral environments. It sound like we were okay with that language. And so when it happens, like I don't think that it's clear, and in fact, it kind of looks like it's not the
Well,
case that
even if
we've
it
got
didn't
a
convey an
natural
advantage,
disposition.
even if it didn't convey an advantage, and even if we weren't. So wait, so I'm confused. So even if it didn't convey advantages, and if we weren't quote unquote designed, whatever these terms mean, I'm resisting the temptation to go back into I'm
Yeah,
using a term I don't. But so let's just say we had the 50-50. Let's just say we had this 50-50, and it just was like it was a fluke. This was
yeah.
some crazy fluke that was 50-50 karyotype split,
Yeah.
producing sperm and eggs. Um, would you say that this person is both male and female? Is the question.
I think I'm much more inclined to say yes in the case of
Okay.
50-50, but again, it's not a clear case. And the difference is this, like if it's a 99%, 1% split, then it's easy to see that like the organism is the 99% bit, and then we've got something that is a bit like a
Mhm.
foreign invader, and so it doesn't look like it is necessarily part of the organism. It's like, when a virus comes in and transforms some of your cells, that's not the way it was meant to be. This is a
Mhm.
foreign body. But when it's 50-50, then it's like, well, where's the organism with the foreign body? Are you going to pick the left half or the right half? We've just got this mosaic organism here. And so there, yeah, I'm much more inclined to say that would be a true simultaneous hermaphrodite.
Okay.
But on the other hand, like at the same time, like this was not part of the design plan. It's
Right.
not the way
Right.
humans were meant to
That's the thing
reproduce.
I'm drawing because
Yeah.
again, I don't know exactly what you mean by the terms to be the proper design plan, but what I am getting a sense of is that you are inclined to say that yes, this is both a male and a female. You've defined male and female in terms of what were meant to be proper function, those types of words. You don't believe that the 50-50 split is what we're meant to be proper function design, whatever you mean by those terms. You're evaluating it to false, and yet you're still inclined to say that it's male and female. So I'm drawing a counter example to how you're defining male and female.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think is going on. Like the organism, it was never meant to be that we have an organism that's a 50-50 split like this, or just mosaics generally are a sort of difference. Is it a kind of difference in sexual development? It's just a difference in development anyway. Maybe we could even call it disorder. So it was never meant to happen. But here we are, and we have an organism with this 50-50 split, and we've got this functional ovary over here and this functional testy over here, and they're making gametes. And so, yeah, the question is, does this organism have a natural disposition to produce eggs? And yeah, in this case, I guess it kind of looks like maybe yes, despite the fact that like this organism there was never meant to be this kind of mosaic in the human species. Of course, that wouldn't mean that it's like not human or not worth value or respect. It's just, it was a difference in development, a disorder of development. But yeah, I guess that would be the clearest case. But yeah, I think we just keep coming around to the fact that I agree that it is at least theoretically possible. It's certainly actual that there are organisms that are both male and female. So the definition of male does not exclude being female. The definition of female does not exclude being male.
Okay.
Organisms can be both. Possibly a human could be both. Yes.
And then just the other thing to before we move, just to reflect on it's so we agree it's not a binary variable then, but the only thing is just
hold on. I don't know if we agreed on that yet.
Okay.
So when you say like the sex of an organism is a binary variable, I wonder if there's, I don't know what the right way to put it is, but is there
I'm
a
not
kind of
saying sex
presupposition in there that there's got to be one sex or there's got to be one assignment, one sex assignment? Because if I'm right that the definition of male and female aren't exclusive, then as we say, it's possible for
that's
an
what
organism
binary
to have.
variable means. As understood
Yeah, then I just wonder whether there's only one variable. When I ask like what's going on with an organism with regard to sex, I don't think that there's just one slot to answer that question. I think there's, I don't know how many. I guess in theory you could have lots of sexes.
Sure.
As things actually turned out evolutionarily, we just have two.
Yeah.
And so there really should be two slots in there. There should be two variables.
Wait, I'm not understanding.
If we ask of an organism what's going on with this organism with regard to sexual reproduction, I think that just saying male doesn't answer the question, because we'd also want to know also female. Is this organism also female? So yeah, I don't think that.
So what are we can say what are the sex parenthesis s, like what are the sex or sexes that this organism is?
Yeah.
Or this organism.
And when it comes to sexes, there's only two. But when it comes to combinations of sexes, there are four, I think. Right?
Four. Yeah. You could
have neither.
Yeah, because you can get into some, excluding some philosophical debate about if neither should be considered a sex.
I don't think it is a sex. No, but it's a possible combination of sexes.
Yes, a possible combination of sexes. I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then there will be four. So then we agree it's not a binary variable if there's four possible outcomes.
There are four combinations. There are four combinations of sexes. There are only two sexes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now we're wondering, should we say
binary
that
variables
sex is a binary variable?
Yeah, because with binary variables,
Looks like the internet is down for a few minutes. Thanks, Rogers. Really appreciate that.
That's the
Well,
question. And then you're saying if sex is binary, there should only be two answers.
if it's a binary variable,
Yeah.
there's only two outcomes. Yeah, there's only two possible outcomes. So
Yeah.
so if I ask the set, so if I yeah, so it would be either male or female if those are the two bits.
Yeah.
If it's the yeah.
So I'm sorry to go back to like presuppositions and questions again, but I think that question has a presupposition that like if a human has a sex, it only has one. Or if an
No, no,
organism
no.
has a sex, it only has one. Because you said like for any human organism you pick, what sex, singular, is it?
Oh no,
But
we,
of
we talked
course,
about it before. We can put the parenthesis s there. That's fine.
yeah.
Yeah, so we can
Okay,
say
but
sex
then we're
or
talking
sex.
about like combinations of sexes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
combinations
then
of the
we
bits.
agreed there's four of those.
Yes. Yeah, but what the point is, what it means to be a binary variable is that in the combinations of the bit system, that there are only that each unit will only have one of only two possible outcomes. So
Yeah,
if it was, yeah,
but notice we changed the question. We asked like, pick any organism you want. What's going on with regard to sexes, biological sexes in this organism? And there we're talking about combinations of sexes. Do we have just male, just female,
oh
both,
yes,
neither?
okay. So I don't, yeah. So we can disambiguate any equivocations on the word sex. So sure.
No, I mean, if the question were just like, hey, I've got an organism here,
Mm-hmm.
it has a sex. Um, what are the possibilities for this sex? Then I think we agree there's only two options. So if we are very clear that we're talking about like we've got a manifestation of biological sex here. What are the options? There's only two. But if the
If we
question is
specify it only has one, yeah. If this organism only has one sex, what
no, I
sex?
didn't. No, it may have more than
Oh,
one,
sure.
but I'm saying like it has at least one. I'm thinking about at least one sex that's instantiated in this organism. How many
Okay.
options are there for which sex is instantiated? Two.
Are you considering um, uh, male only an option, female only an option, male and female an option?
No, I was trying to phrase the question so that it's clear I'm looking at an organism that has a sex. A
Okay.
sex is being instantiated. And then I'm wondering like, well, how many options are there? And I thought we'd
When you
agree there's only
sex
there's
is
only
being
two.
when
What's
you
that?
say a sex is being instantiated,
Yeah.
do you mean that there's just at least one instance of male or female?
Yeah, this organism
Okay.
has a natural disposition to produce a
Mhm.
gamete.
Okay.
How many such natural dispositions are there?
Okay. So
Two.
then
There's two.
there can be well
But this organism may also have another natural disposition to produce a different gamete.
there are two natural dispositions um, that there are such that the organism can have. Um, However, there are three different ways the organism can have such of those two, um, or really four different ways the organism can have
Yeah.
those. Yeah, and so if what I mean by the question is just when we say the sex, uh, the because this is going back to what I was trying to disambiguate with the equivocation with respect to sex is that I think it may be happening. Um, is just I think that in ordinary language when people if we were to ask it, like let's just say this person existed with the 50-50 split that is producing both sperm and egg, and they were to ask 100 people like hey, the sex that with the understanding of this person. Hey, the sex that I am is male and female. Like, that's my sex. Then would they say, oh yes, that's true, or would they evaluate it as false? And I think most people would evaluate it to true. And the reason is I think they're using that word sex as the latter thing that we were talking about rather than the former. They're using it as this outcome from selecting these bits, the bits being male or female. And the outcome that is of those four possible combinations is just what people are referring to. At least
Yeah, so I think if it happened that, there were a human who was a true simultaneous hermaphrodite, and this human said, my sex is both male and female,
Yeah.
and other people were inclined to agree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure whether that means we've got equivocation going on in different senses of the word sex. It could just be a misuse of the word sex. And a way to evaluate that is think about other species that do this. I mean, surely there are species where we've got organisms that are only male, organisms that are only female, and then we've also got some organisms that are both. Does that happen in any species? Probably it does, but you tell me, medical doctor. I would have thought that when describing this species, biologists would not say there are three sexes here.
No. Yes, no, I agree that I agree that in a biological sense that they're not going to say that there's three sexes. No, I agree with that. I'm just pointing out that there is a difference in it's just like a secondary definition. It's not that there's a misuse of the word. It's just that the word has different meanings depending on different contexts. So, for example,
it may be ambiguity.
Yeah,
but it may also be a misuse.
Well, I'm not saying it's ambiguity either. Like, I'm saying, so, like, for example,
by ambiguity, I just mean like more than one sense. And I thought
you
said it's
fine,
a secondary
that's fine.
sense.
Yeah. So I'm just drawing. No, it could be a misuse. They could mean, hey, listen, do you think that there's three sexes? And they do some evaluation, say like, oh, actually, no, there's not three or more sexes. And then, but you say, oh, wait a minute, but you just said this person is the sex that is male and female that this person is. So yeah, it could be that they're wrong, or they could say, no, I think there are three sexes because I am using that word in a different sense than what you've described. So that's fine. Okay,
I think one of those two things is happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I don't think we have a disagreement. So if what we mean by sex is just that is the ordinary usage, if that is the ordinary usage, where if people were to just refer to the outcome of male or female that an organism attains, that an organism manifests, then that would not be a binary variable because it is possible for an organism to manifest male and female. It is possible for a human to manifest male and female.
I was thinking about this question ahead of time because we had talked about it previously, and let me know what you think about this analogy. I thought it was sort of like shoes. We've got left shoes and right shoes, left-footed shoes and right-footed shoes. But there are four ways you can wear shoes: just the left, just the right, both left and right, or neither. And if somebody had both shoes on and said, "This is a third shoe," I understand there are left-footed shoes, and right-footed shoes, but I've got a third kind of shoe on.
Mm-hmm.
It's both.
Yeah.
I think the right thing to do in that case is correct them and say, this is not a third kind of shoe. You just have both shoes on. So why don't we do the same thing with sex?
No, I am. I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying, so to say that I think there's a difference between saying one can maintain that there's no third sex, and also maintain that sex is not the sex a person can be is not a binary variable. Like, I'm not saying, my question is not, is sex a binary variable? My question is, the sex that people are is a binary variable. So similar, if we were to analogize that back to the shoes, I'm not saying there's a third shoe because people are can wear left or right, and left or right, or so either left only, right only, or both left and right. What I'm saying is that the shoes that people wear is not a binary variable. Because if it were a binary variable, then what that would mean is that that people either only wear the left shoe or they only wear the right shoe, and they will never wear both. That's what a binary. That's what it would mean. Yeah, that's
I guess we're just disagreeing about this question about this: is the sex a person is a binary variable? But we agree that sex is binary in this sense. There are only two of them.
Sure.
And these two sexes aren't exclusive, they're not exhaustive, but there are only two. And there are four combinations of these two sexes.
Yes.
I guess I was going to press one more. This is kind of an objection to, I take it your view is the sex that an organism is not a binary variable because there's more than two options. I was just going to point out, and I think you briefly mentioned this already, that I think what you're really talking about is combinations of sexes, and one possible combination is the neither combination. Just the neither combination, not male, not female. But I think it's pretty clear that this is not properly called a sex. And so this shouldn't be one of the values if we're thinking about like how many values are there for this variable of sex. Neither should not be a value for a variable of sex because it's not a sex, right?
Well, that could be granted. We can grant that neither is not a sex. We could grant that this, but the question is just the question is not again the question wasn't is sex a binary variable. So my question again is the sex or sexes, we can say that a person is a binary variable, and what that just means is just with the shoe example, like the same thing, like the shoes that people wear, the type of shoes people wear is not a binary variable. And you could say, well, hey, if people don't wear either shoe, then we shouldn't be calling that a shoe. And I agree, we shouldn't. But it doesn't change the fact that the shoes that people wear is not a binary variable.
It's a way of being with respect to shoes, to have neither shoe on. Okay, and there are four ways that people can be with respect to sex.
Sure, but
even though there are two sexes.
But sure, but again, the fact that not wearing either shoe is not a shoe, that doesn't in any way change the fact that the shoes that people wear is not a binary variable. Similar with sex. The fact that neither sex is not a sex doesn't change the fact that the sex that people can be is not a binary variable.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of tripping on just this idea of what a binary variable is, and this, I still don't feel confident that I understand the question, but I am pretty confident that we agree on the reality of the situation, and we're just wondering about this question when it comes to binary variables, what's the right answer? And we just disagree about that.
Well, under the sense of binary variable, that is, well, which is the standard definition in data science, in mathematics, in logic, I believe as well, and I can provide citations if you'd like. What it means is just to only be able to take on one of only two possible values. And so if I were to model the shoes, I would, if there were a left shoe and a right shoe, each and I would model the organisms. Each organism would only either have a left shoe or a right shoe for it to be a binary variable. The binary variable being that the shoes that the people can wear. Similarly with sex, if male and female are the bit system, it's like left and right shoe, for the sex or sexes that
It's like we're dealing with a little more trash internet. Sorry.
not like when you shoe a horse, you like put shoes on a horse.
No, I
How
agree.
many ways can a person be shoed? 4 ways.
If I were to ask the question, how many? Look, if I were to say, if I were to ask, is the kind of shoes left versus right a binary variable? I'll tell you, yeah, it's construed to be a binary variable. But notice how I didn't ask the question, is sex a binary variable? That's not the question I've asked you. The question I've asked you is the sex that people can be a binary variable, right? Which is different from, is sex a binary variable? Just like with the shoe. I'm not asking if shoes are, if the type of shoe left versus right is a binary variable. I'm asking you the shoes that people wear, the way that people wear shoes. Is that a binary variable? And that's not. Same thing with sex.
Right. So if I understand the question in the same way, I would understand if it's supposed to be analogous to how many ways can a person be shoed?
Mm-hmm.
If I just take the analog in the sex case and ask how many ways can a person be sexed?
Yes.
What can be happening in this organism with regard to sex? Then there are 4 things that could be happening.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So I
we
think
agree
did we agree?
We agree. Not a binary variable.
I don't know.
Cool.
Depends on what you mean, I guess. We'll agree on that. Depending on what you mean.
It's just well, with that understanding, I think you do understand what I mean now.
Okay.
And I think with that understanding, it's not a binary variable.
All right.
And I think you agree with that.
I'm just going to leave it at the last thing I said, and then.
What's with the hesitation to just?
Well, yeah. Do you want me to just repeat what I said? Like, if you mean this, how many? If it's like the analog of how many shoes are there?
You don't need to say if I mean it. I've already specified that that's what I meant. And the question is, given that meaning, it's not a binary variable. Yes.
Yeah, if it's analogous to the how many ways can a person be shoed question, there are 4 things in my domain that could go in for that variable and make the sentence true.
So the question is, so then given that meaning of the question, the sex a person can be is not a binary variable. We agree.
Yeah. I guess the reason I'm reluctant is obviously you're aware there's a big debate about whether sex is binary or whether it's a spectrum. And I just worry if you say this out loud, the sex a person can be is not binary, is not a binary variable. People are going to hear that as, Dr. Avi thinks sex is a spectrum, and there aren't actually 2 sexes.
Let me just point one thing out. So that's not that is a good reason to provide clarification. It's not a good reason to avoid be hesitant to avoid answering the question when I think it's very clear what's being asked, and I think it's clear that you agree with what the answer is, given that I stipulated the way I meant it. So I can clear it for the audience. That's fine if that's your concern.
I guess it's a product of philosophers aren't the only ones to do this, but we try to write in a way so that we can't possibly be misunderstood.
Sure.
And teaching undergraduates, I have to be really careful about that.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to communicate that.
It's not enough to be clear. You have to forestall all misunderstandings. So as long as we've done that, you don't think sex is a spectrum, right? If I asked you, hey, is sex a spectrum? You'd say
no. I don't. Well, it could depend on how you define spectrum, because the light spectrum could be discretely defined, and you may be able to have some small amount of values, but regardless, putting that aside, no, I'll just say very clearly the fact that sex is not the sex of people are is not binary, is not a binary variable. It doesn't follow from that the sex people are is a spectrum. I will happily say that and declare that for the audience. One does not follow from the other. So I don't want anyone hearing that, the sex people are is not a binary variable, therefore the sex people are is the spectrum. I don't know how it depends. Yeah, I don't. We're taking spectrum to mean that there's it's a continuous variable, that there's multiple different values, like a digit, like a scale, like the same way numbers are, or the same way, with decimals and whatnot, and you could, go anywhere from 0 to infinity, or negative infinity to positive infinity, or anything like that. There's innumerable values, or something like that. It doesn't follow from.
I'm ready to sign. I think we agree.
Good. Great. Okay. Thomas, non-binary, sex is a spectrum. I knew it. Okay. All right.
That's going to
Okay.
be the clip, huh? They're going to clip that out.
There you go. Okay, so then the other thing, boy, if it took this long for one, how long is two going to take? Even if
Yeah,
all
I'm going to have to
right,
leave in like
yeah.
25 minutes, by the way.
Okay. All right, cool. So, all right, even if definitions are, maybe we can have a part two then. Even if you're okay with it, if you didn't suffer too much already.
I sort of regret. I don't know if Isaac's still here. I sort of regret that things got a little tense there with Isaac.
Nice guy. I don't think it's.
I resolved to do better next time. I
I
think we
don't
could
think
get
it's even
along.
like. I don't think it's even tense. I
I'm
think
still
like
here.
yeah, go ahead.
Can I be heard?
Okay.
Yeah, you can be heard.
Yeah, no, don't worry at all. I mean, yeah, it's no problem. If anything, I mean, I was probably more intense than you were.
Right. Appreciate that. What's next on the agenda?
Next is, even if definitions are propositional, there is a reason to have a definition of woman other than the traditional one, even if it is a secondary definition after the traditional definition.
Yeah, so I guess the reason would be the positive consequences of affirmation of people's gender self-identifications. That's the reason?
No, that wouldn't be the reason. In fact, so I mean, it may be a reason, but I wouldn't be in terms of like a definition. I take the motivation to be to capture public meaning, to capture ordinary usage, and I don't take it to be. Well, I don't take ordinary usage to be limited to 50+%. So if we were, and I think regardless of how you quantify, whether you do it over the globe, it will be most people would mean the term woman as adult human female. I think if you do quantify it over the United States, most would mean it as adult human female. Some might make a claim about the trend. There was a recent Pew poll of the different years, and people are saying, oh, it's getting lower and lower with a 6% difference and no analysis of any statistical significance or confidence intervals. But even if that is the case, which it hasn't been shown, but even if that is, and just to clear up, if I think you quantify over the quote unquote the West, that I'm not convinced. That I think actually most people may mean something else other than adult human female. But the point is, whatever proportions, that's an empirical discussion that we can. But the point I'm having is just that if the goal of dictionaries putting definitions is just to capture public meaning over a given quantification, then it may be or may not be the case that you'd have another definition. And I think the number of people that are using it in some other sense other than the traditional sense is high enough that it would merit at least a secondary definition. Just like when now I'm not saying that's the only, to be clear, I'm not saying that's the only motivation for dictionaries, maybe. I think there are cases in dictionaries where you have the first definition as the less commonly used definition, and the second definition is the more commonly used definition. An example of that would be the word bitch. In that example, if you go to most dictionaries, the number one definition is a female dog. And that is not the most common usage of that word. And they do have the other usage. They do have the most common usage of the word, but it's a secondary definition. And they place it there. But regardless, they have both of them, even though one of them is used a lot less often.
Yeah, I mean, this probably doesn't need to be said, but maybe it's because the secondary sense there is derivative of the primary sense or something. It's the primary sense used in an insulting, metaphorical way. So maybe that's why they put it second. I don't know. I'm not a lexicographer, but maybe they have some justification for that.
I mean, let's just say it wasn't. I mean, fine. I mean, there's two ways we could take that. We could take it to be like, well, I think it is derivative in the gender case too. I think there's a derivation there, but so I think that would still be parallel. But even if it weren't, I think even if we just did some analysis and found out that actually people just came to this word as some insult and independently. I mean, let's just say that happens. Like, they still would have both definitions of the word if people are using the same word in two different ways.
Yeah, I guess let me just see if I'm tracking with you, and I'm not sure if we're disagreeing yet. What you're proposing is there is reason to think that the word woman is being used in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that might be right. Yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, if you look up the word woman in the dictionary, there are several entries. I mean, a lot of them,
Yeah.
and the primary sense relates to adult human females, but there's other uses too. But as far as I know, none of these like more recently proposed revisionary definitions of
Mhm.
woman that are meant to be trans inclusive, those haven't made it in there yet in the
Yeah, well, they
dictionary
haven't.
anyway.
They
But
may not have. Well,
they could. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So the point,
Yeah.
the point is just that, if not already in there, there is some. The point is that there is some usage of the word woman other than the traditional sense that has made it to enough, whatever the threshold is, to enough popularity to the
Yeah.
point where it merits its definition. It merits some definition in the dictionary other than the traditional sense. Now, what
Well,
that is, how we cash that out, how vague it is, like that's a whole different conversation.
yeah.
But
Yeah, well, I will say this. There's a little bit of a fly in the ointment here, a little bit of a challenge. And we touched on it earlier when we were talking about whether sex was ambiguous, whether the word sex was ambiguous, or whether there was some equivocation going on. And I said it could just be misuse. So that might be happening as well when, for example, trans activists and trans inclusive philosophers use the word woman. And don't seem to be using it in a way that is expressing adult human female.
yeah.
One possibility is they have introduced a new concept.
Mm-hmm.
They've sort of intentionally used the old word to express a new concept. Guess I can't think of an example of when we've done that. Well, we do that with names all the time, right? Whenever you baptize a kid with a name.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So they could be doing that, in which case, yes, ambiguity. But something that pushes in the other direction is they also seem to want to disagree with like dominant mainstream context and contradict them. So when someone in a dominant mainstream context says trans women are not women, somebody in one of these trans inclusive and queer communities typically says like, you are wrong. On the contrary, trans women are women. And it sure seems like they're disagreeing. And that puts pressure on us to, like, when we're interpreting what's happening here, we get this pressure to maximize relevance. We want what the people are saying to be relevant to each other. And so that, again, pressures us to think like they're using the same concept, but at least one of these groups is misusing it.
Yeah. I don't think, and by the way, I don't think that they're using the same. So I think that they are. I think so, I'll tell you my intuition on this. I think that if you took a person who says you are not a woman to a trans person, the average person who with on basically the average at your level of understanding or greater, so the average Thomas, and went to a transgender scholar or what of gender studies or whatever, say, listen, and let's say this person is trans, say, listen, you're a transgender woman. You said you're not a woman, and they say, no, no, no. On the contrary, I am a woman. I actually don't think that you're using the same concept there. I suspect what's happening is that you are using the word woman to mean adult human female, and by female you mean properly, however we cash that out, disposed to produce large gametes, and it may be some ambiguity of which gender scholar is using what they mean by woman, but I know they don't mean that. I know that when they say I'm a woman, they're not referring to that. Like there may be we could have yeah.
Well, let me give you an example from the philosophical literature that's kind of relevant here. Maybe you've heard of it. It's from Tyler Burge. Pretty sure he's still at UCLA. Involves Arthritis Man. Have you heard of Arthritis Man? He's a guy who went to the doctor complaining of arthritis in his joints. This didn't really happen.
Mhm.
This is fictional, but he complains of arthritis, or sorry, not in his joints, in his thigh. He complains of arthritis in his thigh. Um, Arthritis Man conceives of arthritis as like any sort of pain or discomfort in the body. Basically, that's what he thinks arthritis is. And so he's got some pain in his thigh. unbeknownst to him, arthritis is a disease of the joints. He couldn't possibly have it in his thigh. Let me know if I'm getting this wrong. This is like philosophical urban legend, but that's what we think about arthritis.
Okay.
The doctor corrects him and says, look, it's a disease of the joints. It couldn't be in your thigh.
Yeah.
The arthritis man accepts correction, defers to the expert, and says, okay, my bad. It's something else. So this is an example of how somebody can use a word with a meaning that is obscure to the user. In his mind, arthritis was any sort of discomfort in the body. But that's not what he was referring to. He was referring to a disease of the joints, unbeknownst to him. This is kind of why this is why we talked about water so much in that Vosh debate. That was supposed to be an example of how somebody can refer to something and have a totally different conception of what they're referring to. Aristotle thought of water as an element. Unbeknownst to him, it was a molecule the whole time. So we can't just
wait. Hold on. It could just be that the arthritis person was referring to some pain when he said, "I have arthritis in my thigh." He's just referring to some pain in his thigh, and then upon realization from the doctor, when the doctor says, "No, you're wrong. It's not arthritis because arthritis only applies to joints." What's happening there is just the person is maybe realizing either implicitly, explicitly, consciously, subconsciously. It's just that this is not the way the term is used. I was, in fact, referring, when I said that word arthritis, I really was referring to the pain in my thigh. And I wasn't wrong about that. It's just that when the doctor said I'm wrong, what really is being conveyed is just that on the standard usage of this term, the way we're all using it, we don't mean that. It can't mean that on this usage. Maybe it can mean that on your usage, but on our usage, we don't. And if you want to just 1 second. And if you want to use these terms in a way that you will be understood, which presumably is one of your goals, you'll use the word arthritis to refer to arthritis in the joints, and then the person shifts over.
Yeah. So if he were to say like this, pointing to his thigh, this is arthritis, it's pretty clear that this is referring to the pain. But think about the whole sentence. This is arthritis. Is what he said true or false?
So that depends on what he means when he says arthritis. Yeah.
So we add to the story that he accepts correction, defers to the expert.
Okay.
Now, what do you think?
So if by accepting correction and deferring to the expert, what that means is that he acknowledges that he was saying a false proposition and understands that, then sure, I don't understand that. That's spooky to me. But we can get into that. But
that's spooky, you said?
Yeah, I think it's spooky for someone to. So let me just finish the thought, and we can get to that. If, on the other hand, when he says, I accept correction, what he means is just that he has some goal of using standard terminology of arthritis, the doctor corrects him. He says, okay, I accept correction. And by correct, I just mean I have the goal of using standard terminology. I wasn't doing that. I was out of accord with my goal. Then, yes, he accepts correction, but it's not that he was uttering a false proposition. So he could say, like, by accepting correction, I'm not admitting that I was uttering a false proposition. That's not the type of correction I'm talking about. I'm just saying that I was out of line with my values. So my values are to use these medical words in the way that doctors are using them. I realize that I have failed to be in accord with that goal, and so I'm correcting myself to be in accord with that goal. But that doesn't mean that I've uttered a false proposition when I say this is my arthritis in the thigh, because what I was referring to really just was the pain. And when I accept correction, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it's a false proposition.
Yeah, well, I agree again that he did succeed in referring to the pain in his thigh with that demonstrative this, if he says like this is arthritis.
Okay.
The this refers to the pain in the thigh. But what he says of that pain is this is arthritis. And then the question is like what concept was he using there? What proposition was expressed by that sentence? This is arthritis. Was he using the common concept or was he using some idiosyncratic concept?
Yeah, and the point is
most people judge, I'm not saying you have to conform with the herd here, but most people judge, he was misusing the common concept.
Okay, yeah, no, I grant that there are two possibilities. Someone could be someone can really say like, hey, listen, the pain, like this is arthritis in my thigh, and what he means by arthritis is a pathology of joint. And then of course he's mistaken. Like there is no pathology of joint in your muscle of your thigh because there's no joint there. Or he can be saying there's arthritis in my thigh. And what he just means is that there's pain in my thigh. There's some kind of his notion of arthritis is something other than a pathology limited to joints. Yeah. The point is just that he can, whether he's right, whether he's uttering a true or false proposition, it just depends on what the proposition expresses, and it could be idiosyncratic. And if it's idiosyncratic, then it's not clear that he's saying anything false on that idiosyncratic notion of arthritis.
Yeah. So I agree with you. Those are the two possibilities, and we probably agree that it has happened and commonly does happen that people misuse common concepts and end up saying things that they don't intend to say, but what they say is false.
Yeah. I think there may be both probably happen in the transgender community. There may be. Look, I'm not going to deny that there aren't some transgender people that have said that they are a woman in the sense that you're talking about, and they were misusing or something like that. Like I grant that could happen. Yeah. I also think that there are transgender individuals that mean something else than you when they say they are a woman. They don't have the same concept in mind. There's going to be some proportion. Now, it could be on one side or another, but there's going to be a chunk of transgender individuals that just are talking about something else than what you're talking about when they say that they're a woman.
Yeah. So I agree that, some philosophers are quite explicit about this. They say, like, let's just get rid of the ordinary concept and replace it with a new concept. Which concept should we use? And then they specify it with necessary and sufficient conditions. They give you a stipulative definition. They say, henceforth, let us use the word woman to express this property or set of properties. And then I guess, it's pretty clear in that case that when they say woman, they're referring to some other set of properties, not adult human female.
So what I'm saying is I suspect, and I know I am confident that at least some subset of the transgender community, the disagreement is not really a disagreement in this, because you're not using, when you say you're not a woman and they say I am a woman, you're wrong. You're just talking past each other because you're talking about different concepts. I suspect that might be the majority of the cases, but at the very least, I think there's a good chunk of transgender people who that would be the case for, where it's not really just a disagreement where you're using this.
Okay. So it sounds like, again, we may have agreed. Are we agreeing?
I think
I guess what I've pointed out in my work is one problem that these new definitions have, I'm sort of granting that, you could stipulate a new sense, a new concept to be expressed by this old word woman. Sure, we do that all the time. The kids do that with slang words. They use an old word to express a new concept. We do that with names. Whenever we use a name, we use an old word to express a new concept. So that could happen. But one problem is these concepts that the philosophers keep coming up with tend to be trans exclusive. They don't include all trans women. And it looks like they may also fail to exclude trans men and at least some non-binary individuals. And so,
So when you say trans women, you just mean people who consider themselves trans or identify as trans?
No, I would have thought it's somebody. Yeah, so I know this. I watched the review you did of my debate with Vash. And so I thought, like, here's what happened. I had a slide where I defined a trans woman. Believe it or not, I had like and I realized this is going to be way too long, and it turned out way too long anyway. And one of the things I cut was the definition of trans woman because I thought I was just using it in a standard way, and nobody would be tripped up about that. But then when I watched your review, I was like, ugh, should have. And later on in the Q&A, I did define trans woman, but I should have front loaded it. But what I thought the standard definition was, I thought the standard definition of trans woman was somebody who identifies as a woman but was assigned male at birth.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's the community. Yeah, I completely reject. Like, I completely abhor that definition. Like,
I don't know, Avi. I watched a debate you had with two people named Lauren, and you said the definition of transgenderism is the condition of someone feeling that they are not the same gender as they are
not the same
sex.
thing. Wait, that's not the same thing as identify. Having some
but there's still like a possibility of error. It's still possible on this definition that you give. Okay, but in the review I watched of my debate, you said, well, trans woman is just a woman who was assigned male at birth.
Wait,
But that
what?
in the review, yeah, you said like, well, if we define trans woman as just a woman who was assigned male at birth,
Plus some other characteristics. Wait. It's a subset of women. It's a subset of women that yeah. So we define transgender as a subset of women. Yeah, that's fine. That is male at birth. And what it means to be a woman is just has some properties, and it could just be that feeling of being a woman. And and so you're pointing out that when I said what it means to be a trans woman is okay.
Well, you mentioned feeling. I mean, I agree feeling is different from self-identification, but
sure,
the definition isn't just a woman who was assigned male at birth. It was rather the typical definition is identifies as a woman. We've got a female gender identity, although assigned male at birth. So typically it's put in terms of gender identity.
Sorry, just the audience, it's more than just a feeling. Like you might be able to like pick out a thing I said in a Lauren debate where
I didn't mean to hassle you about the use of the word feeling. Sure. I just meant to point out that there in the definition, being a trans woman isn't active, so to speak. It doesn't entail being a woman. Rather, we've just got a male gender identity but assigned male at birth, or a feeling of being a woman but assigned male at birth. It's not like.
Wait. Hold on. I'm so just because I don't think it. So you might have been able to pick out something that I've said where it said, okay, well, being a trans woman is to have some feeling. My view, I think I've elaborated it many times. It's a weighted gender characteristics, and what those characteristics are the type of characteristics that are archetypical of a female. So you could think of it as femininity, but it's just more weighted on the mental characteristics, and more weighted on the mental traits.
I thought that was your view of what it is to be a woman. Is that right?
Yeah. It's my view of what it is to be a woman. What it is to when I said what it is to be a trans woman is to be assigned male at birth and have those characteristics. To me, that just is to be a assigned male at birth and to be a woman, because to have those characteristics is just what it is to be a woman.
Do we at least agree that's not the standard definition of trans women?
If by standard you mean 50% or above, I agree.
I mean like American Psychological Association, Human Rights Campaign.
Hey, Thomas.
Yeah.
I am more than happy to grant that especially in the online world, and yes, in many academics, I'm happy to grant that self-ID is complete garbage. It should be excised from, and I think, by the way, that it harms trans people. I think that it's a terrible way of defining trans people. I think it does more harm to the trans community than good. But yes, I agree that there are plenty of people who push self-ID.
Yeah, I grant that. Can I say something? Can you hear me right now?
I wouldn't be surprised if they turn out to be the majority of trans individuals.
Can I be heard? I just feel like we should really emphasize how much of a point of agreement that actually was. Like, when you pointed out the circularity stuff and how you can do like term substitution to show it's infinitely regressive, like these are things that we've been like yelling at people about for like 2 years now or something. To see someone else independently, because presumably you're not getting your philosophy from random YouTube people, to see someone else independently reach the same conclusion and then deliver the same kind of critique down to the T with like even doing the term substitution, we both were very happy to see that, because we were like, thank God.
No, after I started watching your videos, I was like, oh yeah, we're doing the same thing. And I mean, here's why I think that's happening. That was one of the things that jumped out at me when I started reading in this area and researching in this area back in, 2017 or 2016. I heard like self-ID definitions, and I think it has to be the case that anybody with even a little bit of training in philosophy or mathematics or logic or anything hears the definition is like, wait a second, that's circular, like that's a problem. And it was just sort of shocking to me that nobody had really said that in the philosophical literature, even though I'm sure it occurs to virtually everybody who hears it. And unfortunately, I think that might just be an effect of, it's like the chilling effect. People they'd rather not say it because feel like they'll be punished for it.
Well,
But it is pretty obvious. It's something you learn in philosophy pretty early. Like circular definitions are bad. But yeah, I did see that you all had been on that too, and that encouraged me. But I was going to say something else that I thought we agreed on. Oh no, this was something we disagreed on.
Mhm.
So I had said, here's how I've come to understand the circularity problem. I think that as an attempt to convey meaning, like Isaac and I were trying to do a little while ago, circular definitions are hopeless. You cannot convey the meaning of a word in that way. There are other ways to convey meaning besides, giving necessary and sufficient conditions. You can point. That's one way to do it. You can give necessary and sufficient conditions. That'll do it. But what you can't do is give a circular definition. That's not going to convey the meaning. But something that I said, and maybe I sort of regret mentioning this because I don't know, it should have been developed more. But something I said in the debate was, even if the word got a meaning independently of this definition, still the claim that to be a woman is to identify a woman must be false. And I remember watching your review and you're like, wait a second, if there's no meaning, how could there even be a proposition here? How could it be false? So what I meant was, it's possible for a word to have a meaning and be commonly used. I mean, just take like knowledge, for example. I think that has a meaning, and I think we all grasp the term and we use it all the time. It is hard to convey the meaning with necessary and sufficient conditions. Philosophers have tried for a long time and failed. But the word already has a meaning. Suppose I tried to convey the meaning to you with a circular definition, I would fail. But the word has a meaning nonetheless. And now suppose I claim to you that to know something is to identify as knowing it. Now, of course, this didn't convey the meaning of the word to you, but the word already has a meaning. And you can see that that sentence has to be false. It's not true that to know something is to identify as knowing it. So that's what I meant to say. Like, even if the word woman has a meaning, we didn't get it from the circular definition, but suppose it has a meaning, it just can't be true that to be a woman is to identify as a woman. Because there's just no property like that. There's no property such that you have it if and only if you identify as having it.
Yeah, I
So that's what I
remember.
meant to say. So what do you think about that? Are we
Yeah, can I be
are we
heard?
on the same page now?
Am I coming through? Am I coming through?
You're
Yes.
coming through.
Yeah, so I think I tried to generate a counterexample to that in the debate, but then I realized the counterexample didn't make sense. I can't fucking recall it and think of
No,
why,
you
but
said it's the property of identifying with a
Yeah.
different property. Like you
yeah,
said,
but that's
so-
confusing. That doesn't work. When you actually look at the sentence and highlight the thing that it like I can't remember it, but it didn't fucking work. So that didn't end up making sense ultimately. But yeah, I mean, I think we even said in there cuz we were like when you said it's false and it's meaningless, I was like, I have a feeling he's misspeaking because I think I even literally said like this guy
Yeah.
has like a Phil PhD. That's basic stuff. Like he's probably misstating something there
Yeah.
because there's no way he
Well,
he
I'd
thinks
hope I didn't say
there's no
false
way he
and
thinks that.
meaningless because that'd be bad.
I think
I
you
think I
said
did
if it's
say, I said it can't convey meaning
you said it was
and
meaning.
it's necessarily false.
Didn't you say it was
Um,
meaningless and necessarily false? I could be wrong.
I think I did say that on my slides. I said this
Yeah.
can't convey meaning, but it's consistent with not the circular definition not being able to convey meaning. It's consistent with that to say, nevertheless, it has a meaning. So what I meant to say was like
I
it
remember
definitely can't
meaningless.
convey meaning, and
But
even if it has a meaning, it's got to be false.
yeah, I think it's just a phrasing thing. It says if it is circular, doesn't convey meaning, and it's necessarily false.
Yeah,
It's yeah. So who the fuck cares though? It's like we all understand it can't be meaningless and false at the same time, and we understand.
yeah,
I'm not sure I get what you mean by the false. You're making some different point though. You're saying like if it has a meaning and someone I'm not sure I followed that, but I understand you're not saying that it's meaningless and false at the same times, and that was the criticism. Yeah.
yeah. I think I also, yeah, I'm actually not sure what to say about this, and maybe I'll just run it by you really quick, and you can help me think through this. I think I said in the debate, or at least not true, and that was me
yeah, no,
hedging.
that's fair.
Um,
At the least, not true. Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
because here's my confusion. I think what's being claimed when somebody says to be a woman is to identify as a woman, they're saying like, hey, there's this property, being a woman, and here's something very interesting about it. you have this property if and only if you identify as having it. And I think what you see upon reflection is there is no property like that. There simply is no property like that. So the predicate is a woman.
Yeah, can I just understand why your example fails, Isaac? Like, I want to understand this for my own.
Yeah.
Like, let's say I say, people who identify. So what does if I ask is so? Let's say I say the property is having the property of identifying as intelligent, right? So I say that's the property. The property is. So let's say I ask, does this person have the property of identifying as intelligent? Well, I think the only way that someone can have the property of identifying as intelligent is to identify as intelligent. But
yeah, well, the sentence is like the general form of the sentence is we're wondering, is there some property such that you have it if and only if you identify as having it? And if you're saying, what about this property, identifying as being intelligent? Then what we'd have to wonder is it possible to identify as being intelligent without identifying as being intelligent? We got to do
I
this
see what
little.
you're saying. Yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah,
we got to add the identifying out front.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then it is possible to identify as intelligent without identifying as intelligent. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah.
All right.
So anyway,
if there is no such property, there's just no property such that you have it if and only if you identify as having
it.
It's
an inductive argument. Basically, you're saying like there's no.
Yeah.
I thought you were asking if your hedge of saying at least not true worked. Because that
that's a different point.
Yeah, because to that question, I think it depends. So when you say not true, it's like it can work because the kind of things that are not true, like things that aren't propositions, have the property of not true, right? Like it's not true that bottle, right? So I see what you're saying there, but there is one level someone could go to where they could say, well, if the thing being talked about is literally incoherent, it can't even be part of propositions, in which case it's not going to be able to have features like truth. So someone might try to go there. But if you grant that it's at least like referring to something, I guess, then just saying at least not true is sufficient.
Yeah, and so again, this is a little obscure to me, but I'll just try to express it one time, and then I'm going to have to leave in about 5 minutes or so. But the sentence was like, somebody's a woman if and only if she identifies as a woman, and now I think I've proven that like that predicate is a woman doesn't express any property. So what's happening with this sentence now? Does it express any proposition? It's got the equivalent of like an empty name in there, like Zeus or Harry Potter. It's saying like somebody has this feature which doesn't exist, if and only if she identifies as having it. Do we say that's false because there is no such feature, or do we say like this didn't even express a proposition, so it's just not true? And there I just genuinely don't know, but happy with the disjunction, either false or not true. Okay. One of those things is happening.
Yeah, I guess it's just when we take something circularly defined and you infinitely you do the infinite term substitution, you just get this like infinite regression kind of stuff. Like, do you think that has any meaning?
No, I think if that was an attempt to like pick out some property, saying like, when you baptize a baby, you got the baby there, and you're like, I dub thee John or whatever.
Right.
I think we do something like that with predicates, but we're trying to pick out properties. We're trying to like baptize properties and say, let's call these properties, this set of properties, woman. I mean, I guess that's what you guys are doing with that set theoretic thing you got going on there when you define woman. But anyway, the attempt to do that with a circular definition just fails. Like nothing is dubbed, nothing is demonstrated. And so, the word doesn't latch on to anything. But this is a little bit different, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna kind of, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking over you, and I'm sorry about that. But I have to run really quick. But I feel like this is like an extra little step in the dialectic, which is interesting to think about. So I'm just going to throw it out there, and you can tell me what you think. It was pointed out to me by another philosopher, Alex Byrne, at a conference. It was like a friendly objection, but he just pointed out, you can have necessitated biconditionals using terms, and the term is on the left side and the right side, so it looks like a circular definition, but it can still be true. And I gave you an example. Well, I don't know if I gave an example, but here's one. S knows that P if and only if S knows that P. And you're like, well, that's got to be true, right? Even though, I mean, it's circular in a way. This wouldn't be any good as an attempt to convey meaning of the word knowledge,
Right.
but it's true. So mightn't, like, set aside the fact that the self-ID definition of womanhood cannot convey meaning. For sure, it cannot do that. Might it be true nonetheless if the word somehow got a meaning in a different way, the way that knowledge did? Could it be true that necessarily someone is a woman if and only if she identifies as a woman? Could that be true? I mean, it reminds us of a circular definition, but we're setting aside that possibility that we were attempting to give meaning to a term. We're just like looking at this biconditional, assuming that the word woman means something. We don't know what it is, but it means something. And yeah, I think what I'm trying to prove is
if it
it's
means
got to be false. But,
yeah, but if it means something, how could you say they have the property if and only if they what was it, identify as having
identify as having it?
Yeah, because it has whatever meaning it is. That's beyond just what they identify as. Sorry, beyond's a vague word to use, but it's the different. Meaning of the term is something more than just that they identify as it, right? Yeah. So how could you say they are the thing? I guess I'm just confused. Yeah, how could you say that they are the thing if and only if they identify it, while saying that a necessary property of it is something other than self-identification? I think that'll involve a logical contradiction, but I'd have to like sit there for a minute and do a deduction to see if it does.
Yeah,
I can
what would have to turn out is like
cluttered.
Yeah, what they're claiming is like woman refers to something. We can't really tell you what it is. But here's an interesting fact about this property that woman picks out. You have it if and only if you identify as having it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there is no property like that.
I think that you can. Is the reason you're saying there's no property like that because if there were, there would be a logical contradiction, or just because you can't think of one? Because if it's the latter, I think you can probably strengthen what you're saying. I think I could probably do it right now if I sat here for a minute. But you understand it. Yeah, it would be stronger to say there's. Yeah.
Well, in the paper, I just sort of like challenge people to come up with counterexamples.
Yeah.
But I do also say something like, given the contingency of human cognitive capacities and our capacity for attention, doesn't it have to be true that like whatever property you put in there, there's no guarantee I'm going to identify as having it. I just might miss it. I might not attend to it. I might not notice it, because like identification is it's a mental activity, and there's just no guarantee that I'll do it. And if I do it, that I'll do it correctly, So that's the closest I came to a proof, but there's no like logical contradiction here. It's just supposed to reflect on the nature of the mind and realize whatever property you pick, I may notice I have it, but I may not. And if I think that I have a property, I may, but I also may not. There's just no guarantee either direction.
Well, I think that it's good to raise the question, right? Like, what kind of property could there be that you have if and only if you identify as having it, and like give people ways to think about that, and that might start seeming really screwy to people. I think that's probably all good. I suspect that you can actually tease out a logical contradiction, and then instead of just saying I'm not convinced there is such a property, can you find one, we might be able to say there can't be. And I'd have to think for a second about the contradiction, but it's something like X is a Y if and only if phi, but there exists an X that is Y despite not being phi, right? You could write that in first order logic, and that would be, you'd get a contradiction. I could sit there more carefully and go through it, right? Like if we say, let's see if it makes sense. You are, so X is a Y if and only if phi, right?
Is a Y it's a predicate there? Is a Y is a predicate? Can we use like F or G or something? That'll help me.
It's okay. So we want to say, sorry, wait, what? You just have a preference about what letters to use? Like you use some over others?
Well, you usually use like Y as variables, and F's and G's, capital F and G as predicates, and
okay, all right. So here, are you wanting to write it out formally? Because like what I'm going for is something that's going to have the structure of like, here I can think of how to write it out. I could write it here. Do you want me to take a minute to write it in FOL while you guys talk, and then come back maybe?
You can formalize it, because I actually did want to like in the interest of time, I just wanted to say a few things. So first of all, I enjoyed this conversation. I hope we have a part two, because to really get at the heart of the matter, because for me, the heart of the matter is, I think self-ID is harming the trans community. I think that it's either incoherent, meaning that it conveys no meaning at the very least, or that if there's a use-mention distinction, that it's just going to have some hilarious reductios that people are just going to dunk on trans people with. So if it's just like, well, it just means utter the label, woman. So then that's not circular, because, WOMAN, they're using the sense, well, it's the 5-letter sense. But, I think it's clear that, we want to say that people who are otherwise the same, but they lose the property of being able to identify as anything with 5 letters. We still want to say that they're trans women, and the fact that they only got the first 4 letters, it doesn't really change what we want to say about that. So, for me, I think there is a way of, and again, this is not saying that we want to be all ontologically inclusive in the sense that we are infallible, that people can't be wrong about what they are. I think that's crazy too. I think there are some trans people who are wrong and they're really cis, and I think there are some cis people who are wrong and they're really trans. And that's on my view of what gender is. So, and I think that it would be crazy to think that, just that's part of being human. Like there's some percentage of people that are wrong about the nature of themselves. This happens all the time, and I think that's okay. There's this real push to be like, oh no, like, can't be wrong about it. Like, well, yeah, you can. But I don't think that adopting my view is going to result in people like just excluding people, and I think a lot of that is just because of technological limitations. You can't read people's minds and look at the properties of their minds, their preferences, and a lot of their attributes to make some kind of judgment. But anyway, the point I want to raise is that I think that there's a better way of cashing out gender, a way that, and by better I mean avoiding circularity, avoiding all the crazy reductios that self-ID does, and still capturing quite a bit, if not a substantial amount of what the transgender community is capturing, in a way that would warrant at least a secondary definition in the dictionary. And that really is what I'd like to have as a secondary conversation.
Yeah. Hey, that's a nice cliffhanger, Avi. And I think you're right. Like, if I'm seeing things correctly, it looks like the next step in this cultural conversation is reevaluating self-ID, and maybe the pendulum swings back in the other direction, and trans activists, trans inclusive philosophers kind of back off that requirement definition of woman, that it respect everybody's self-ID. And then it's interesting to think about, like, how would things be in a post self-ID world? What would things look like? I guess, yeah, that would be interesting to talk about, but I really do have to go, unfortunately. It was nice talking with you both. Again, sorry I got a little prickly there. Maybe next time we could revisit the realist, anti-realist conversation a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Do you want? I can remove that part from the conversation if you don't like it.
Oh, well, I mean, to be honest, I don't really. This was a long conversation, 2.5 hours, and I don't exactly remember how it went. But I don't know. I'll leave that up to you.
I think it went well. We typically don't, unless he has a really strong preference, we typically upload conversations in full without any editing, just to show that we're not like taking people out of context in any way.
Yeah, I just don't want him to think he got a realism thing like sprung on him, and he said things like that he's a bit unhappy with how it went or something. So I just want to give him the chance to.
I'm happy with how the conversation went, by the way. Just to be clear,
me too. It's just if I'm talking to anyone and they voice a little regret about the conversation, whether it's their fault or my fault or whatever, it doesn't matter. If they say that, then I'm always just gonna ask, like, yo, would you rather it like not be uploaded, like, or that part cut out or whatever? It's just like
I think it was.
Courtesy.
I mean, I think it was fairly typical for philosophers. I mean, it was like a philosophy seminar room. I don't think anyone was particularly mean. I was just doing the equivalent of like reaching
Yeah.
out and shaking hands or something. That's what I'm doing.
Oh yeah, no. I mean,
Um,
to me, it's totally normal. But sometimes people are very I don't know. If you don't care, I don't care even remotely though. I'm just trying to be polite
yeah,
by giving you the option to have it removed if you didn't like it.
yeah. I just mean to say there's no hard feelings on my end, and it was nice talking with you.
Yeah, same to you. Totally. I'd be happy to do it again. But you got to do something about that fucking dog noise.
Okay, I'll see you guys later. I'm gonna take off.
Okay.
I'll reach out to you for setting up a secondary conversation.
Good chat, and thank you for showing Vosh that the proposition that water is H2O was in fact still true before we had such a definition. That was very
I
good.
certainly tried to do that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was successful.
I think it was really good. Fuck you got to go, but I just want to say about that particular part of the debate, if you don't mind. Yeah, it was just really funny because you kept saying like, look, you understand what the proposition means, right? Now that had a truth value at any given point in time, and the truth value was true, right? And he tried to say for some reason the truth value of that proposition hinges on whether humans have like term meaning or something. So what the fuck are you talking about? We're not talking about could a historic being have understood this proposition, or could they have had epistemic access to its truth, or we're just talking about was it true? And obviously it was, and he seemed like a fucking lunatic when he said that. So I think that was well done. My only complaint was not pushing it further and like just annihilating him on that. But you were being polite, so whatever.
All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
totally.
It was good talking with you.
Okay, peace out.
Things that are true have constructed premises that necessarily lead to an outcome or resolution, but the definitions are applied presuppositionally.
Okay, end of discussion.